Listen to The Astonishing Junk Drawer exclusively at patreon.com/astonishinglegends. I wanted to do some show and tell. No, this isn't in Poltergeist.
Oh, look at his mouth. His mouth is going crazy.
Well, that egg is 7,000 years old.
Well, it's considered the Roswell of South America.
FOIA request, which it's not clear who requested it.
I'll put it in the private chat.
Just tell me the name. I got them right here. New clothes coming out. We got coffee, believe it or not.
I'll step out for a bit and grab a sandwich, maybe.
It looks more like a rubber duck from your bathtub. Bleary-eyed, doom scrolling at 2 a.m.
Astonishing Legends would like to thank Masterclass, Factor, our contributors at patreon.com, and you, our listeners, for making tonight's show possible.
Welcome back, Astonishing Legends listeners. As we inch closer and closer to Halloween, we find ourselves involuntarily drifting toward the veil that separates our reality from the unknown. Tonight, we're honored to bring you 3 more guests and their stories to ponder, while you put up your Halloween decorations and drive to the store for more fake blood. With these latest tales, we'll learn quite a few things. Things we feel like, well, you should have known. For example, always lock your doors, even if you think you live in a small, quiet, safe town. Take note of your surroundings and stay alert, especially if something seems odd about a series of events or the behavior of a stranger. You might be in the presence of a visitor from another time and place. And when we think about the possibility of life after death, we often look for uplifting stories to help frame our belief systems. But not every life after death experience conforms to that standard. Some of them are terrifying, as you'll hear tonight. So once again, we remind you to make sure you're alone. Check under the bed and in your basements and attics. Lock your doors, dim your lights, and join us as we share some of your astonishing legends.
Welcome back to Astonishing Legends. I'm Scott Philbrook, and this is Rachel.
I believe that through my work, I've experienced incredibly positive things. I've experienced a veil very, very thin, and I've experienced what I would call, angelic visitations. But if I believe in that, then I have to believe in the other.
Join us tonight for the final part of your Halloween listener stories, the second of 3 shows in a row for October 2023.
And we're back. Happy Halloween.
That's still 10 days and 1 more episode of ours away, my friend.
Well, that was my Dan Hurley impression. Not very good.
Okay.
Also, a lot of people, man, they don't listen to the show as soon as it drops, as soon as we post here. They let it age like a fine wine.
Yeah, it does take some people a minute.
Or they just get around to it weeks later,
You're right. You're not wrong. A big thanks to all of you who ordered the limited edition Halloween merch. Ordering for the 2023 Halloween hoodies and shirts has now closed, and our merch team is working furiously to get everything to everyone, hopefully, before October 31st. So be patient as the printing and shipping begins.
Yeah, and the sweatpants were such a hit. They're still in the store. We're extending those for a little bit longer, and they're no longer aimed at a pre-Halloween arrival to you, but they are still available for purchase.
And we'd like to take a moment to wish our good friends Adam and Matt over at Graveyard Tales a happy 6th anniversary.
Yeah.
But then we also wanted to remind them that we were already 3 years old when Graveyard Tales was born.
No, I think I was in my early 50s. But Jim Harold was already 9 years old when Astonishing Legends was born. He launched in 2005.
Well, this is the circle of life. Once again, proving Jim is the OG paranormal podfather. And I guess that makes Adam and Matt the unruly grandkids?
I guess. And what does that make us?
We're the uncles that no one wants to see at Thanksgiving.
Okay, well, I'm not sure about all these metaphorical relationships, but I will go with that.
Me either. Anyway, happy 6th anniversary Graveyard Tales. Speaking of both Jim Harold and Graveyard Tales, Forrest will be joining Graveyard Tales on October 28th, and I'll be joining Jim Harold that same night on live streams that they're doing for Halloween.
Yes, because this year Halloween falls on a fabulous Tuesday.
Yeah, so, what's that about? Lame.
That's the way the calendar works, I guess. But The idea, though, is that you have some weekend fun here before the
Yes.
actual day. So,
That's
yeah,
right.
just check out jimharold.com or Graveyard Tales on all of their socials to get more info on all that stuff. And meanwhile, you've probably noticed something new on our main feed. It's a new show from the Astonishing Legends Network called Scared All the Time. The first episode has already been released if you're subscribed to us, and the second episode will drop next week before our final October show. So you can get those both just by staying tuned here. After that, you can find Scared All the Time wherever you get your podcasts on their own feed and subscribe on the platform of your choice.
It's a great show hosted by Ed Vicola, or as listeners and viewers of the Astonishing Junk Drawer from Patreon know him, The Mechanic, and his friend Chris Kulari. Both of these guys are accomplished writers in Hollywood and just generally hilarious. It's a very different take on horror and all that's scary from them, so find it, subscribe, and enjoy.
All righty, sir. It's time to dive into these stories tonight because we got some really good ones.
First things first, we said this last week. We need to say it again. We asked for stories, and wow, did you folks deliver? We got so many amazing stories in, and they're still coming in, and we're still reviewing them.
Yes, we are. And I guess I'm reviewing most of them.
Well, yes,
initially,
you are.
anyway.
And Tess has been helping as well. I've read a
that's
ton
true.
of them.
No, that's true.
But yes, you are definitely on point. I'm just trying to get all these shows out the door.
Oh, I know. There's a lot going on. Lots of plates spinning, lots of loaded plates. Those plates are overloaded, but we hope it's all really stuff you're going to enjoy. I just want to say thanks to Tess because she's done a lot of heavy lifting.
Yes, she has.
Sorting through, doing the initial triage.
The merch, all this stuff, the stories, just lots and lots of stuff.
Yeah.
So Tess, just a shout out to you. If we haven't said it to you on our Slack, we're saying it to you now on the air. Thank you so much. We wouldn't be where we are without you.
Absolutely. And yeah, just doing a lot of triage work. And I do want to say this, everything that's come in has been amazing. And we're just so honored to have your trust to receive these stories.
Yeah, that's right. We only really needed 6 or 7 for our episodes this year, which means we have well over 100 other ones that we're going through, and there are a lot of really great ones in that group.
Yeah, and you know what? In light of them being so personal, intimate, sincere, I just want to say, if you didn't hear from us, it's not over yet. We're planning to develop a whole new short show, possibly weekly, that is made up of these and other stories we've gotten over the years. So please don't be disheartened if the story you sent in isn't in tonight's or last week's episode. We're going to be reaching out to a ton more of you, probably early next year, to get your stories recorded too.
Yeah, we're so excited. We cannot wait for that. But tonight, we're bringing you 3 new guests. And because we've got a lot to get to, we're just going to dive right into the first one right now.
Yeah, this one's pretty good and spooky. And, well, I like this angle about it. Potentially, it has a terrifying real-life true crime connection.
Well, we would like to welcome Megan to the show. You sent a pretty cool email in with a very interesting story in it. Thank you for joining Astonishing Legends.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
How long have you been listening to the show?
A really long time, actually. I think I came in on like the 13th or 14th episode, so it's been a while.
Oh, wow. Yeah, that has been a while. Wow. Well, thank you for sticking with us so long. I'm always surprised when people do that, so thank you.
I've listened to every episode except for the one about the earwig. I tried, and I couldn't do that one.
All that other weird stuff, that's okay with you.
Yep, just no bugs in my ears.
No bugs in the ears, yeah. Yeah, that one, folks, if folks are looking for that older episode, I believe it's called What's Gotten Into You. Try to check that one out. That's quite a story. Well, why don't we just go ahead and dive right in here to your story? We'd love to hear it.
Well, my story starts in August of 2011 in Moscow, Idaho, which is where the University of Idaho is located. It was my senior year at the University of Idaho, and I lived off campus with my best friend, and then originally we had one of our other friends living with us, but they ended up having to drop out for health reasons, so we got a random roommate who ended up being one of the best roommates I ever had. She worked like 3 jobs, so she was basically only home to eat and sleep. And so I'll say there's kind of like a precursor to the main event, and just a little background. This is something that just happens in my family where pictures move around. It's happened ever since I was a kid. It happened a lot to my dad, especially the picture of his brother, who died before I was actually born, would move all around the house. And so anyways, I don't know if they do this everywhere, but in Idaho, it's like a big deal. When you're in high school, they have senior pictures. And so I had some leftover senior pictures that I hadn't given out to people. They're like just little wallet size pictures that you're supposed to write something on and give like to your classmates. And those started, like I had them in my desk, like in a drawer, and those started sort of like popping out in random places in the house. I will say that the story takes place in August, but we still had our Christmas tree up because we were just, well, we were college kids and we were like, whatever, we're just going to leave the Christmas tree up. So one of the first places that that picture was found was in the Christmas tree. So that was really weird. And it was like right at eye level, as if like someone set it right where someone would see it. And then also my best friend, his ID card kept moving around. And eventually we never found it again. But like that would show up in weird places like the fridge. Or like we'd get up in the morning and it would be like on the TV. And he was like, I don't know what is happening. I have put this in my wallet and now it's showing up every which way. So, and then I think my picture also like showed up on his door handle at one point. It was really weird. But that is something that just sort of happens in my family, and it usually means something weird's about to happen.
It's interesting that this just the ID, specifically with it being in the refrigerator, is a funny thing about my dad, who was kind of like the absent-minded professor, as I know that when he was younger, he used to go and get coffee and he would put his wallet in the refrigerator. Just that he did it. He knew he was doing it. It was no ghost. He would just like, I always thought that was a funny story about him because he would put, it's like you put something down. It's like when you see the car going down the road with a Starbucks coffee on the roof. And that's my dad too. But with an ID, that's such a specific thing because that's like, that comes out of your wallet. It's a separate, you have to go to the trouble to dig it out, or these pictures are in a drawer, or that's really fascinating.
Yeah.
So, Megan, it seems like your family has a little bit of a history with apportation, as it's called in the ghost hunter realms, where objects disappear, reappear in other places at different times. Some things disappear completely, but it seems like these objects that go missing are placed in areas where it's almost like, whatever's doing it knows that you're going to find it there. Is there anything else that's happened to your family or that's kind of a family trait, as you said, that maybe is passed down from your paternal grandmother, your brother, you said he has it, your dad? Anything else that's kind of paranormal that's a family tradition or trait?
Yeah. Most often it's pictures that get moved, but other things get moved too. Like I remember one time when I was really little, my grandma had got my brother this big stuffed bunny. And one of my brother's shirts went missing, and my mom like tore up the house trying to find this shirt. And then one day we woke up and the shirt was on the bunny. And like my brother didn't do it because he was too young to do that, and I didn't do it. So, and my mom swears that I did it, but I was like, I didn't do it.
Well, it's got to be one of the kids. It can't be something paranormal.
Right.
But there's a bit of playfulness about it. There's a bit of, as you may describe here, something wanting the family to remember them, or like, I'm still around, just I like being thought about, I'm still here.
Yeah.
Or it's sometimes a warning. Can you explain a little bit further about the different types and meanings of messages?
Yeah, sure. So my dad was really convinced that a lot of it was his brother. His brother, my uncle, died the year before I was born, almost to the day. And so my dad had always thought that my uncle sort of watched over me specifically. And then a lot of the stuff that happened with my dad, he felt pretty sure that it was his brother moving stuff around because he would move, besides pictures, it would be like guitar picks, and they both played guitar and things like that. Or sometimes like his picture would show up in the guitar case, kind of thing. So I think that one's specific to like our family. I do think it probably is my uncle, or somebody
close,
in our
somebody who
past.
knows you. Does it keep coming on? Does it keep happening?
It hasn't in a while. not specifically from what I would think of as my uncle. I have something that I now call the ghost cat that lives in. I think that it follows me, but I've seen it the most in this house that I live in. And the reason why I call it the ghost cat is because I don't have any cats in the house anymore, but my roommates who no longer live here had a cat. So usually whoever was first down in the morning would open the door and the dog and the cat would go out. And so I was the first one up, and I was downstairs making breakfast, and the dog and the cat come down and they want out. So I let them both out, and then I go back to, cooking breakfast, and then I bring my breakfast over to the table and I look up and the cat is on the stairs. So whatever I let out was not the cat, but it looked just like the cat. And then when those same roommates moved out, I was talking to my friend, a different friend on the phone, and I said, oh, I really miss their cat. I wish they would have just let me keep that cat. And then right after I said that, a really loud meow echoed through the whole house. I was the only one home. It was just me and my dog. And of course, dogs don't make that noise. And she was asleep. I could see her. So I thought that there was a cat stuck in my garage or something. Yeah. And I went all around and I couldn't find it. And then I was just like, it's the ghost cat. That will move things around, or it will hide things. And it wants attention. If you give it attention, then it will give you the thing back. So I try to give it a little bit of attention now and again so it won't steal my things. Or sometimes I will get a cat toy and be like, this is for you. You can do whatever you want with this. Just leave my stuff alone.
Do the cat toys, did they ever go missing?
I've never heard them move. But I have seen it on the floor in one place, and then when I come back into the room, it's in a different place, but it doesn't make any noise. Right. So I don't know if it's just teleporting or what.
Wow.
Yeah, and that happens probably once a month with the ghost cat. So, but I don't think that one is my uncle. I think the other big thing that happens is so my dad did pass away when I was 13. And so the day that he died was a week before his birthday. So every year in that week, I usually get some weird thing that will happen. Usually it's lights flickering, or something is moved, or one time I went into my office and somebody had changed my calendar month and stuff, and I was just like, did someone do this? Are you guys messing with me? And everyone's like, no, we didn't do it. Why would we change your calendar? And so the last one that I got last year was, I have a lockbox and it has 2 locks on it, and we use birth dates. One of them is my birth date and one of them is my spouse's birth date, and somehow both of them got changed to my birth date. No idea how that happened, but we had a hell of a time trying to get it open. And then I was finally like, you know what? I'm going to try my birthday on both of them, and it worked. And so I was just like, oh, that's got to be my sign this year, because it was during that week. So
wow,
I was kind of expecting
amazing.
Something.
Those things are hard enough to change the combination on, even if you're alive and sentient and on top of things. Yeah. It's I have all kinds of bike locks that I can't open anymore. So that's fascinating.
It's always something that's just a little bit complex enough that you can't think that it happened by accident.
Right. It's a little more than a coincidence. Yeah.
Yeah. Or one year I came home, and as I was coming home, all of the porch lights in the apartment building that I was on flashed just as I was coming in, and then they went back to normal and everything was fine. And I was just like, oh, okay.
It's your yearly message. In August of 2011, your father was already passed away at that point.
Yes.
Talk about, if you will, just what that school year was like leading up to August. So you obviously you had the summer off, I'm imagining, and then you're coming back for classes probably just at that time.
Yeah, I think we were only back 2 or 3 weeks at that point, and I worked for an Upward Bound program in college, so during the summer they had summer camp, and that usually included traveling, which was really nice gig at that age. So we would usually take our students to Washington, D.C. and New York. That's kind of what I would be doing in the summer. So I had just been back probably about 3 weeks before school started, and then we were a couple weeks into the school year when this took place. My best friend is a year older than me, so he had already graduated the year before, but he was working at the mall still, kind of trying to figure out what's the next step. And I was like, please don't move. I can't afford the apartment without you. So he was sort of just kind of waiting for me to graduate. And so that's kind of where we were at. And the day that this happened, he was at work, and so was my other roommate. She was almost always at work. She had like 3 different jobs. So it was a Saturday, and I had got up and I'd done a little homework and everything, and college student. I had a job part-time in school, so I was always busy. So Saturday was kind of like my do my chores day. This is important to the story. I know it sounds kind of like a weird detail to add, but I did my bedding laundry that day. Washed my bedding, I changed my bed, everything, and then I went and took a shower. Our apartment was tiny, and our bathroom was even tinier. So if no one was home, I would leave the door open because the fan did not work well enough. So I was in the shower, I had the door open, my bedroom was just right across from the bathroom. So we're talking like 3 or 4 feet between my bedroom and the bathroom that I was in. So I took a shower and everything, and I usually listen to music, so I was kind of singing and all that. And then I get out of the shower and I went back to my bedroom, and I went to pull my pillow up because I didn't have a chair or anything in my bedroom. I just had my bed. Poor college student. And so I would often like put the pillow against the wall so I could sit on the bed like that. So I picked up the pillow to do that, and a note fell out from underneath my pillow. And I was really weirded out by that because I was like, well, I literally just changed the pillowcase and this was not here 20 minutes ago. And of course I opened it and read it, and it was somebody talking about regrets over a relationship that went poorly, which again didn't relate to me because at that point I had never really had a relationship. So I was just like, oh, this is really weird. And I mean, it gave off concerning vibes, and it was just like, oh, I wish that we could just go back to how it was in the beginning, and I'm so sorry, and blah blah blah, and this kind of stuff. And I was like, okay, what is this? And at the time, I still thought that I was dealing with a physical person who had left this note. And I was like, maybe they meant to leave it for my roommate because I know that she has an ex-boyfriend, and maybe they just got the wrong room. But I know that this note wasn't here before I went in the shower. So if someone brought it in, that happened while I was in the shower just a few feet away, which was really creepy. And so I just kind of didn't know what to do at that point. I called my roommate who was at work and tried to explain to him what was going on. And he was like, what are you talking about? So I just left the apartment and went to his work and showed him the note. And I was like, this was under my pillow. You know, he's like, oh, how long has that been there? I was like, well, I just made my bed, so it just showed up. So we were talking about it, and I was really creeped out. I didn't want to go back to the apartment alone in case, like, somebody was waiting there or something. And he was like, well, let's call the cops and tell them what happened, and you can just wait here till my shift's over and we'll go home together. When we got home, we called the police, and they sent somebody out, and he came in and he read the letter, and I explained to him, like, again, I'm telling everybody that I just did my laundry, but like, I was like, I just changed the pillowcase and sheets and stuff, and this was not there. Like, this appeared in a small window of time. And basically the cop was like, yeah, this is kind of a concerning note, but I didn't know who it would be from. Like, he kept asking me, like, do you have any ex-boyfriends or something like that? And I was like, no, not really. There was one guy that I kind of had like a little thing, but it never took off. And as far as I knew, he wasn't even on campus anymore. So, and we didn't know each other well enough for like the contents of that note. And he suggested, that we asked our roommate if maybe it was meant for her. And she was like, no, I have no idea. And basically it came down to they're like, well, you had your door unlocked, so there's not much we can do. They didn't break in. They just came in and they left something. They didn't take anything. They didn't ruin anything or mess up your stuff. So yeah, lock your doors. We're like Northern Idaho. Moscow these days, probably people do lock their doors after everything that's happened recently.
Well, we're going to talk a little bit about that, towards the end here. But just to clarify for people what the scenario is, because that alone is a little disturbing and creepy. You had gone to take a shower. Now, your front door wasn't locked, but this is, it's a little bit off campus, and it's not, people have to understand, being from the region, it's pretty safe. I mean, I had older relatives who never locked their doors. It's that kind of place, or was. And so people were a lot more trusting. You didn't get people just wandering in like you do nowadays. So it's not a common thing. And you felt very safe. So you're taking a shower, the steam is building up, you have that door open with a fan going, and you had just changed the bedding. So whatever happened, whoever that note got there, it had to have happened while you were taking a shower.
Yes.
And your roommate, she's off working, your best friend and your other roommate, he's at work. So no one was there, and they're very unlikely to have played this kind of a prank. And then also, I think you said, you told your best friend there that a few things have been happening in the weeks leading up to this, and that kind of paranormal stuff really freaked him out. Like he did not like that, wasn't down with that.
Yes.
It still does. And was there any idea, I guess the question is, when you touched the note, did you get an immediate weird vibe just by touching it or just reading it? Or was it just like, well, I'm kind of creeped out because I don't know where this came from and who it's for?
Touching the note was really uncomfortable. It felt really gross, and like the regret that the person was talking about, like you could almost like feel that regret when you touched the note, or at least what I did. I know my roommate did touch the note, and I don't think I ever asked him how he felt touching it, but it like kind of instantly when I saw it, even I was just like, ooh, I felt like cold. You know how sometimes you feel like your stomach drops?
Right.
That sort of, it wasn't a curious like, oh, what's this thing under my pillow? It was like, that should not be there. And the more I read it, the more I was like, that really should not be there.
You've watched the Netflix series Mindhunter, yeah?
Oh, yeah, very well done, I thought, as I would expect from David Fincher's involvement.
Yeah, me too. Very dark, of course, but very much enjoyed it. Well, guess who I discovered on the Masterclass platform? The man who that character and series were based on, former FBI Special Agent John Douglas, who became the first criminal profiler. His developing theory that behavior can be predictable led to the formation of the FBI's first criminal profiling program.
Yeah, I actually saw that, and I knew who he was because my wife was like a big fan of his from a long time ago. She loves true crime.
Oh, yeah.
People might be thinking,
Right.
sure, that's all entertaining, but I'll never run into a serial killer, so it's not really something I need to know about. But think about this. We've all run into people who are manipulative, controlling, and domineering, 3 traits all criminal minds exhibit. And they'll try to use you for their own nefarious purposes. So if you can profile those personality types and avoid them before you get mixed up with them, that'll save you a lot of grief.
That is exactly right. I mean, no one ever thinks they're going to run into a bad person, but people do. And this kind of information, like the wilderness survival sessions I talked about, can actually save your life one day. But something I learned from Lesson 5, Spotting a Liar, John Wayne Gacy, and something we often talk about on the show when it comes to people's testimony, never trust a polygraph. John Douglas is really against lie detector tests because people think that a habitual liar is going to respond like they do, but they don't. Ted Bundy and the Green River Killer passed polygraphs over and over again because one of the key factors with a psychopathic personality is their lack of anxiety, possibly because they feel their crimes are justified.
Wow. So whether they pass or fail, remember that next time you want to dismiss or believe someone's paranormal account based on a polygraph. Well, this fall, learn from the best to become your best with Masterclass, from leadership to effective communication to cooking.
Whether you're watching Masterclass on TV, listening in audio mode, in the app, or on their site, the quality speaks for itself.
It's like Masterclass instructors are your own personal mentors that are going to help you reach the next level.
Yeah, how much would it cost to take one-on-one classes from the world's best? Easily hundreds to thousands of dollars. With a Masterclass annual membership, it's $10 a month.
Memberships start at $120 a year for unlimited access to one-on-one classes with all 180 plus Masterclass instructors. Learn how to negotiate a raise with Chris Voss or manage your relationships with Esther Perel.
I've learned so many useful things from Masterclass, and I know you will too. There are over 180 classes to pick from, with new classes added every month. Like John Douglas teaches you how to think like an FBI profiler. That gave me tips on how to assess someone's story for truthfulness, not only for the ones we cover on the show, but for folks I meet in real life. Or Session 10, developing your intuition. When danger is close, listening to it could definitely save your life. Being armed with this knowledge is a real confidence boost. And even profiling yourself is beneficial because, as Douglas says, by understanding who we are, we can better understand others.
That is so true. Well, with Masterclass, you can boost your confidence and find practical takeaways you can apply to your life and at work. And if you own a business or are a team leader, use Masterclass to empower and create future-ready employees and leaders.
And right now, our listeners will get an additional 15% off an annual membership at masterclass.com/legends.
Get 15% off right now at masterclass.com/legends.
Masterclass.com/legends.
Emily and I have been listening to so many different podcasts lately, but we recently found one we were hooked on. It's called Badlands.
Oh yeah, I could have told you that. I've been loving it so far.
For those of you who haven't heard it, Badlands is an anthology series that blends history and true crime to tell the transgressive stories of some of the biggest names in Hollywood. And this is not the Hollywood history you've heard before. These are uncensored, immersive, edge-of-your-seat storytelling.
Oh yeah, Badlands is hosted by Jake Brennan, the creator and host of the award-winning music and true crime podcast Disgraceland, which we just talked about.
I love Disgraceland. It seriously does not pull any punches at all.
No, it does not. Well, Badlands is the same way. It explores the most insane stories surrounding the most interesting icons. It's covered many actors, directors, and more, including the mysterious deaths of Marilyn Monroe and Natalie Wood, Tim Allen's former career as a low-level drug dealer, the curse of the movie Poltergeist, how porn star John Holmes got caught up in the infamous Wonderland murders, and more episodes on Winona Ryder, Johnny Depp, River Phoenix, Gianni Versace, Robin Williams, Heath Ledger, Sharon Tate, Robert Downey Jr., and so many more.
I mean, who's left? That's a lot of people.
It is, sir. Unfortunately, though, there seems to be no shortage of new applicants in Hollywood.
No, there isn't. New episodes of Badlands are released every Wednesday, with bonus episodes released every Friday.
Subscribe to Badlands on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, the iHeartRadio app, Amazon Music, or wherever you get your podcasts.
Hi, I'm Kat Wells, and you're listening to Astonishing Legends with Scott Philbrook and Forrest Burgess. Now back to the show.
All right, so for the listeners, inevitably, that right after they hear stories and they say, oh, well, it just came from here or whatever, they look for the mundane. I always try to think of that question to ask. There's a couple of things I wanted to ask about that. One was, how long had you been in that apartment?
At that point, we had lived there for at least 2 years.
Okay, so a good while. So whoever or whatever left this thing, it's unlikely that, someone else was there 3 months before you,
right,
that lived there that this might have applied to. Next question is, I presume, because this is generally the case, when you moved in, you brought all your own, it was empty.
Yes. Yep.
When you made your bed, there's no chance that the note had been in some weird place in your room, and then when you made the bed, it flew off the top of a bookcase and landed under your pillow or something like that.
Nope. We actually had very little furniture.
Yeah, no one has furniture in college.
Yeah.
Right? And me and my roommate, we got all our stuff was discards from grocery stores.
Yes.
They would put like a display out on the back loading ramp and we'd bring it home.
Yep.
Well, so Yeah, our entertainment center at the top, it said 100% Arabica beans. That's what it said on that, because it used to be a coffee thing. So there's not any chance of the note spontaneously appearing in that way. Do you remember what kind of paper it was on? It was handwritten, I presume. Was it cursive? Was it printed? Or...
It was handwritten, and it was sort of like a mixture of print and cursive. You know, like some people kind of have like the loop into stuff, but then other things are completely standalone. It was sort of like that. It was a little messy, but legible. Like there wasn't any like, I don't know what this word is or anything. And it was just on a piece of like regular notebook paper.
Like when you're in elementary school, kind of like
Yeah.
lined paper?
Like lined paper, and it was folded up. Yeah.
And it wasn't addressed to anyone or signed by anyone. It was just the message itself.
I think it said like something like "Dear One" or "My Beloved" or something
like a
like
pet
that.
name.
Yeah, like it didn't say an actual name, but it was clear that like whoever they were writing it to, they had some kind of like romantic attachment to, which again is why I was like, this is not for me.
Okay.
So before we get to the usual or possible suspects in your story, as you were saying earlier, just want to make this clear that in the weeks prior, strange things have been happening. Your roommate's ID showed up in the freezer. It was also found in a textbook that he hadn't opened in over a year.
Yeah, we never found it, even when we moved out like the next summer. Everywhere. We even moved the fridge to see if it was behind the fridge, and we never found it.
Yeah. How did he think to look in the textbook to find it if he'd not opened it for so long?
I think it was actually my textbook because we were in the same program.
Mm-hmm.
We were both psychology, so we shared books, and I think he was giving it back to me because he had already like taken that class. So he's like, here's the book.
Right.
And so then when we opened it, we're like, wow, why is your ID in here? That's really weird.
Yeah. Now everyone seems to be a bit disturbed by this because, like you said, even if it's just a creepy human or a misguided person who is troubled, what you read from the note is this person was really unstable. And as you described, didn't seem like they knew what they themselves were capable of as far as bad acts. And so that's disturbing. Now they know where you live at least, or they have mistakenly think where this, the intended person lives. So as you're going over the details with your friend over and over again, like, well, who could this possibly be? Because either it's somebody who really has mistaken the total wrong building. And certainly, it's a college town. There's a lot of young kids in school, especially at that time, having started up again. It seems like somebody has mistaken this and went to a bit of effort where they would have gotten caught, perhaps. If you just come out of the shower, got a glimpse of them, screamed, whatever it is that it could have gone badly, further. So that's disturbing. But who are you starting to wonder might have done this? Because obviously it seems like maybe there's some kind of connection.
Yeah, both we and the police officer were like, well, is it your other roommate? Because we didn't know her super well. We didn't know her before she became our roommate. And like I said, she was hardly ever home. So we kind of told her about it. Well, we wanted to let her know anyways, just because it was possible someone broke into the house and left stuff. And she was like, no, that wouldn't be anybody I know. And so then one of my best friend's former roommates, when we were living on campus, we had kind of, liked each other and that kind of thing. And we're heading towards dating, but unfortunately he had a bit of a drinking problem. And before anything really happened, he had ended up in the hospital because he drank too much, and turned out that was on purpose, unfortunately. And so he ended up dropping out of school for a while and going back to live with his parents. So I was like, that's the only person I could think of that would have like some kind of like romantic regret that they would want to put in a note for me. But I was like, I don't even think he's in the same town right now. I can't remember where his family lived, but it was fairly far. And I don't think he would have done that. He probably would have just tried to talk to me. And then I can't remember who thought of it first, but something had recently happened in the town, unfortunately, where one of the psychology professors had murdered one of the students. And it came to light that he had been in a romantic relationship with her. And this was a professor that both me and my best friend had been in his class and had interacted with him. And he was generally very well liked. He did the research course for the psychology program, which is usually everyone's least favorite class, but he made it pretty entertaining and fun. He also had some mental health issues himself, and we did see that one point. He came in one time for a lecture, and like, to be honest, we all thought he was drunk because he was kind of like slurring, and he did the lecture that he did the week before as if it was new.
Right.
And then we were all kind of just staring at him like, what is going on? And he was like, what's wrong? Like, why aren't you guys just pay attention or whatever? And he was not his usual self, because usually he was really funny and nice, and like if he called on you and you didn't know the answer, he wouldn't be mean about it. He would just kind of play it off as a joke and then ask somebody else. And he was just kind of mean during that particular class, and everyone just sort of was like, what do we do? This is so weird. And so we didn't want to like get him in trouble, or we were just like, okay, we'll just like sit through this lecture and then leave, which is what we did. So I had taken his class the year before, and then he had asked me at one point if I wanted to do research, be one of his research assistants, but I kind of turned him down because I was more on course for like the counseling side, and he was doing more of like the cognitive psychology stuff, and so I had turned him down. But one of my other good friends who was also in the psych program, she was a year behind me. He asked her the next year, and she was actually getting ready to become one of his research assistants. So when the news came out that he had murdered one of his research assistants, for a few moments we were really scared it was our friend. It turned out to be somebody different. It was a graduate student.
You knew the other student, though, this one that was working with him, that he was, I guess, having an affair with.
I met her in passing a few times. We weren't like close friends or anything, but I knew her name. You know, I could recognize her. She was a little bit older than me, so I didn't have a whole lot of interaction with her, but I did meet her a few times.
Yeah, you had said that she was a graduate student and you were undergrad.
Yeah, I was undergrad. Okay. Yeah. And then when it happened, he had went to her apartment and shot her right outside of her apartment. And I didn't know either of her roommates, but some of my other friends actually lived on the same street, and they heard the gunshots, but it's Idaho, so hearing random gunshots is not that weird.
Mm-hmm.
You know,
I hear them in Greensboro, so, you know, like 3 days ago. So yeah.
Yeah. So, and then after that, he left. There is a motel, I think it's still there, on sort of like the outskirts of town, and he went there and kind of barricaded himself in there, and there was a bit of a standoff, and then he eventually killed himself as well. But he went right past our house, or our apartment, on his way from her apartment to the motel, and we remember feeling so weirded out by that, like, oh, like everything, it was just all so close. It was just all within like a mile and a half of our house, the whole thing. And so that was on our minds because it had just happened like the week before. And like I said, I can't remember if I thought of it first or if my friend did, but we were like, the contents of the note fits that scenario, like the regret, because like that was the main feeling and sentiment in the note was just, I really messed up, I'm so sorry, and just really dark and that kind of thing. And so, because the other thing was, I was like, I just don't know if someone physically could have left that note. Like, I was only in the shower for like 10, maybe 15 minutes, and they would have had to come into the house, go into my bedroom, put this thing under my pillow while I was literally like 5 feet away without making any noise, and then gotten out before I got out of the bathroom. And the more I thought about it, the more I was like, I just don't think that that's possible. You'd have to be so quiet. it'd have to be perfect timing so I didn't see you coming in or coming out. And like I never heard the door open or close, and it was a heavy door, so usually you would hear it if it opened and closed. So, then when my friend or whoever mentioned it, when we started talking about that, I was like, that feels like it fits more.
Right.
And we tried even to find our old classwork from his class to see if like we could compare the handwriting, but unfortunately everything that we had been graded by his TA, so we didn't have any of his handwriting. But the more that we thought about it, the more that that's what it felt like fit, was that it was from him. And I mean, I wasn't like super close to him or to the woman that was murdered, but as my friend likes to say, I'm kind of a magnet for weird. So if he was trying to get a message across in some way.
Right.
You're an access point.
Yeah.
It seems like, with the pictures and everything else. And we have seen that over the years with stories we've covered, the people that are tuned in. I think about the movie Ghost, which a lot of people haven't seen because it's so old now. But in that movie, Oda Mae Brown, played brilliantly by Whoopi Goldberg, once she figures out that she's a medium, then there's just like a waiting room, just tons of spirits are like, we got to get our message through and all of that. And I always think about that idea. It does seem a little bit like some folks who have that gift, it might be total strangers trying to send messages through them back to the living.
Yeah. I've definitely heard a lot of that. Like I listened to Jim Harold as well, and there's a lot of those stories where somebody just meets someone and they're like, "Oh, so and so said to tell you hello," or so that definitely happens.
Well, a lot of times it seems like if you talk to psychic mediums, they'll tell you that you're a bit of a beacon, or some folks are. Everybody has this natural ability and talent, but some of it's more developed than others. And those entities on the other side can, once they find somebody who can seem open to receiving, and most of the time it's just messages that they're just dying to get to somebody, pun intended, that, they're part of the living, but they can't hear them. So it's very frustrating. There's no way to transfer the message. And in your case, if it's an ability with your family, it's objects. And so here's an object that, and what's interesting is that, okay, let's assume for a moment that this note was written by somebody who maybe wasn't him, but somebody who was troubled and needed to get a note that may have been pre-written already and undelivered before they passed. And it needed to get physically to somebody else rather than, in a box of junk that was thrown out. Or somehow we've seen sometimes there's enough energy that these notes are written or things are created by spirit, by the person, and for ad hoc, for that moment and that purpose. And it still needs to get to the right person, where you're kind of like a UPS drop-off location. You're just open to receiving these things and things show up. Now,
Amazon Spirit Locker.
There you go. Exactly. Well, this case, the professor was Ernesto Bustamante at the University of Idaho, professor in psychology. And I just want to mention this because it does seem to fit the tone, as you said, and the vibe of the note. And also your anecdote about him being very different in class. One of the persons quoted in, there's a bunch of different news outlets that have published articles. This one happens to be by NBC News, where they have a quote from a close friend, self-described person, Randy Hope, who said he was a very close friend of Bustamante and told the police, quote, he confirmed that Bustamante had multiple handguns and multiple personality disorders, one of which Bustamante himself said was a psychopathic killer, quote unquote, and another that Professor Bustamante called the Beast. And so he was obviously mentally ill and struggling, but the note also reflects that. It's like what you were saying is like, I'm not sure what I'm capable of. I messed up, and just the difference in personality that you would see in the classroom, where he's usually normally friendly and in control. And this time it's like, wow, that's not like him. And so again, you're trying to make a connection here, but that is something that happened just a short time before you found the note. How long was that afterwards, before the incident where they found him, having been deceased, and you finding the note?
I think it was only about a week.
Okay.
Well, it was really close.
It was really close. Yeah. Because I believe that the murder happened either right before classes started
Right.
or during the first week of class.
Right.
And this happened like second or third week of class. Yeah, so it was very close in time and location.
Well, it seems to, and I think this sometimes can put people in a dark tailspin, but there was complaints about his behavior in the past. Seems like the relationship he had with his grad student was very tumultuous, with some abuse, and I think that's what prompted her to leave. But then he was either on his own accord or asked by the university he was either fired or forced to resign, is what the article is saying here. And it's still unclear because they considered it a personnel matter, not a criminal matter. And so all that's kept confidential. And but he had to leave, so he loses his job or quits or gets fired. Then his relationship breaks up, and that may have been what pushed him over the edge. I'm just speculating here, but that note, just holding it, having it in your possession, was so negative and dark that you folks didn't keep it.
No. We kept it for a couple of days. We actually tried to give it to the police officer, but he didn't want to keep it. He probably would have had to do more paperwork or something if he had
enter it into the evidence locker. Yeah.
So we kept it for a few days, but when we sort of solidified on we think honestly the most likely scenario is that it was somehow manifested from him. And what you said, Forrest, where you said like maybe the note was written before,
right,
and then just appeared. I never even thought of that, which actually makes a lot more sense, because I was like, man, how powerful to fully manifest a note like that.
Right.
It really creeped me out.
I don't think we all know. I mean, certainly a lot of people have seen messages form, sometimes on a mirror with lipstick or the usual thing. And people have claimed that, or on chalkboards, or it depends. I think that I do believe in spirits, that there is some communication there. And if it's not an EVP that's all scratchy, sometimes it's very clear. So there are different ways for them to get the message out. And yeah, I'm thinking about that. It's like, well, that would take a lot of energy, perhaps, to like find a piece of paper, fold it up, write it out, transport that. I mean, but who knows? Certainly we don't all have this nailed down as far as how all this stuff works. But I was just thinking like, well, maybe even more impetus if this note was written and whomever never got around to deliver it. So at least, like I said, instead of going into the trash as this person's possessions are cleaned out and thrown away or just lost, that it got to somebody and somebody read it. And of course, it wasn't the person that it was intended to, because that was obviously wrong. But somebody got to read it, and here we are talking about it.
Yeah, we burned it. We'll definitely remember this forever, for sure. And we burned it because it got to the point where I just couldn't touch it anymore. It made me almost sick to touch it and hold it, and I just didn't want it anymore. And I was like, well, if it is from him, it's for the person he murdered, and she's not here anymore, so I can't give it to her. And I wasn't close enough to know her family or anything, so I was just like, I'm just gonna burn this and kind of like release that energy. And so that is what we did. I think we waited about 3 days.
Yeah.
Finally, I was just like, I can't hold on to this thing anymore. So I burnt it right onto my back balcony in my apartment.
Did you immediately feel a lightness, a release, a heaviness lift?
Yeah, I felt a lot better once the note was gone. I don't even think I realized how much of an impact it was having until it was gone. That whole 3 days, the whole like apartment and everything just felt creepy and dark, and even talking about it kind of gives me chills sometimes.
Did you have anybody that you knew or was in the apartment during those 3 days where you had the note, or maybe even leading up to it or after, have any bad dreams or premonition thoughts, anything that came through, or was it just the note?
I think my friend did have bad dreams, though I don't know if that was like a psychic bad dream or just like everything is crazy and I'm having nightmares. But the first night that this happened, we actually invited a few of our friends over to stay with us, and we all had a slumber party in the living room because no one wanted to be in their bedroom alone.
Well, don't blame you. At the very, very least, it was an intrusion by a stranger.
Right.
Somebody came into your
Yeah.
space. I don't care if you leave the door open or not. That is not cool.
Yeah.
And it feels like a violation. So definitely, yeah. And also, if it was a real live person, they haven't been caught. They could be back anytime. So I totally understand that.
Yeah.
A lot of people that are listening are going to recognize Moscow because it's been in the news more recently.
Yeah.
And that is with regard to the murders allegedly committed by Brian Koberger
Yeah.
of the several students in a home there just in November of last year, I believe it was.
Yeah.
Almost exactly a little over 11 years
Yeah.
after whatever happened, the incident that you were talking about. So, I mean, it's a small town. It's a university town. It does seem a little strange that both of these crimes happened there.
So I mentioned that one of my friends lived on the same street as the murder that happened in 2011. She also lived on the same street that the more recent murders happened. Although,
Oh my
like,
gosh.
years and years apart. Like, she
Yeah.
moved from that first place to the other one, and she hasn't lived in Moscow, I think, for probably like 7 years, but just weird that she lived right next to both places.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
I mean, granted, the town's not that big, but still,
Right.
it's weird.
I mean, of course, it shocked the country and the world. Koberger, him being arrested for those. And of course, the 4 murders did happen. He is still being held as of this time that the trial's not taken place. But the deal is that this doesn't happen there. I know that's a cliche, but like these kinds of things are not typical. If you heard about that in one of our larger cities, you'd go, well, yeah, that's, look, there's 8 million people here in the county, that kind of thing happens. But this is very unusual. And I think when it does happen to a place that people aren't used to that kind of thing, at least hearing about it, it's even more shocking. And I don't know how your friend feels if you talk to her, but being so close to 2 incidents like these, which again are very rare, that's got to be unsettling.
It's only 25,000 people in Moscow, according to the 2020 census. So,
have you been back to the town since then?
Well, yeah, I lived there a whole nother year. And then I haven't been back in quite some time.
Yeah.
I've been back a few times for like friends getting married, that kind of thing. Honestly, I don't really know anyone who lives in Moscow anymore. It's kind of like a transitory town because there's a University of Idaho, and then right across the border is Washington State University.
Right.
And other than those 2 towns, there's like nothing out there until you hit Spokane.
Yeah.
And so most of the time you can't stay there after you graduate because there's very few jobs and a whole bunch of people who have degrees.
Yep.
So
unless
most
you're a wheat
people don't
farmer.
stay.
Yeah. Out on the Palouse. There's a
Right.
lot of farming down there, but
If you start working for the university,
right.
that'll keep you. But other than that, so I don't really know anyone anymore. I didn't know any of the 4 people who were murdered recently either, although I did know the location because, like I said, my friend had lived very close to there. But yeah, I remember seeing it on NPR, and I was like, oh my God, I can't believe that.
Yeah.
And, I sort of followed it for a while because I was interested. I knew Moscow pretty well.
Sure.
And
have you had any additional or more recent incidents that have happened?
mostly just the stuff moving around in my house.
That's still going on.
Yeah, that's still going on pretty regularly. I don't know, I kind of negotiated with whatever it is that's moving stuff, and it will give me the things back. It just wants acknowledgement. So I sometimes, I wouldn't say have premonitions per se, but I get like feelings sometimes. Like, one that's pretty spot on is I will always slow down before a cop is ahead of me. I don't know how I do it, but every time.
That's a good one.
So that's a nice skill to have.
Yeah, you're your own internal Cobra radar detector, so that's handy.
Yeah. I think I could be more open to things if I chose to be, but I've sort of gotten to a point in my life where I don't want to constantly be dealing with that kind of stuff.
Right,
So I think
right.
I kind of just tune a lot of it out.
Yeah.
But
That's pretty common. Well, hey, the needy ghost kitty is enough. Like that's
yeah, and it doesn't have like bad vibes at all. It's just sort of there. And I'm actually going to be moving in December. I've lived in this house for almost 10 years, and I'm going to tell it can come with me.
Maybe you should put down a little cat carrier. Yeah, and
Oh, that would be so
just
cute.
close it up, carry it with you. You won't even know if it's in there, but hey, maybe. Well, Megan, we just want to thank you so much for coming on the show and telling your story. It's a
Sure.
really interesting story, and from all of us, all due respect to the victims of these real world crimes that are connected to this story, but your side of it is, even if it wasn't paranormal, it's still a super kind of scary.
Yeah.
It's a good. You should go on my friend Andrew Tate's show, Let's Not Meet, not the Romanian Andrew Tate, but the Let's Not Meet. This would be a good story for his show.
Yeah. Like I said, it's the scariest thing that ever happened to me, because either somebody came into my house and left a creepy note while I was standing naked a few feet away from them, or it manifested paranormally on my bed under my pillow.
Neither option is ideal.
Yeah.
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 Well, thanks again for joining us, and good luck with the move and the ghost kitty.
Okay, thank you.
Yep. Thanks.
I'll tell you one thing. I am definitely not taking showers with the door unlocked anymore.
I can honestly and accurately speak for the world when we say we would have liked you to have done that anyway.
All right. Our next guest has more than just a few stories that seem to have been culminating in intensity throughout his life.
Yeah, and there's even a Close Encounters vibe in one of them.
Yeah, there's a Close Encounters vibe in one of them, but they are all quite strange and a little bit unsettling.
Our next guest is Chad Bryan, whose story stuck with us because of all the different things going on, the many years all of these experiences have been going on for him. And it is one of those lifetime stories punctuated by some very high strangeness. And we just had to have him on. So, Chad, welcome to the show. And you do a little podcasting yourself, don't you?
Yeah, I've got my little podcast. It's been dormant for a little while. It was Violet's dad's podcast, but I do have a couple other things going on. I host a weekly sports live YouTube show Wednesday morning called Come On Ref. I also have my little YouTube spot in the world, Chat About Sports. So I'm very infantile in the process, but we're getting there. You know what I mean? We're starting up.
You stick with it, and I think in a few 4 or 5 more years, Scott and I might have this one down. It just takes a lot. You just got to peck away at it. It's a hard thing to do, to keep one going, as we always say. Easier to start, hard to keep going. But we're glad you're here. And when did you start listening to Astonishing Legends?
I've been listening for about 3, maybe 3.5 years now.
All right.
I can't remember the exact first episode, but I remember that I worked at a job where I was driving a lot. And you guys are the first podcast that I ever listened to. I had never listened to any episode of any other podcast before you guys.
Wow.
I started looking through your episodes, and you guys had like these 2.5 hour, 3 episode, 9 hour extravaganzas. And I was like, this is for me. Like I'm all in for this.
After so many things that have happened to you in your life, that I don't know if there's a pattern, but as you kind of mentioned, maybe something's keeping an eye on you. And are these connected, as we always say, these random kind of things throughout one's life, and certainly a lot more than I've experienced, Scott and I put together. But if you would, then please start at the beginning, when this started to happen and when you first started to realize in your young life that maybe weird things that aren't supposed to happen are happening.
Yeah, that's a great way to put it too. It's just something keeping an eye on me. I remember kind of feeling like that, but it's so hard to tie things together. But I can remember it stuck out because it was bizarre. It was like the first thing that had really happened to me. I think that maybe I was old enough to realize that it didn't make sense. We had 2 couches. They'd faced each other in our little living room or whatever. And I was playing just these little blocks that I had that, I don't know, just like a builder kit. And I think I was building like a lunar lander looking thing. I don't know what I was doing. I have no idea. I wanted to leave it a certain way. So I put the cushions of the couch up around it. Like I built like a little, like a little home for it, basically. Not really knowing who or what I thought I was protecting it from, because we were all going to leave. But it was me, my parents, and my sister. My sister's like 11 years older than me. Not really a prankster. Wouldn't have done this. But anyway, we've gone for the day and we come home, and I walk over to the couch and I'm like getting ready to like finish building whatever I was working on, and it's not there. And I'm looking around, I'm like, someone clean it up, or I don't know what happened. I look over and it's everything's on the other couch, but all the pieces are in different arrangements, and there were different things put together different ways, and the cushions were knocked down, and it was all different. I do remember asking my parents, like, hey, what's this? Like, what happened? Because I left these here. And they did the little kid thing, like, oh, I'm sure you removed it and forgot, or you did this or did that or whatever. Because I have kids now, and sometimes when my kids say creepy things, I don't want to admit that, oh yeah, hey, something's going on here.
Right.
But I knew what it had looked like and how I had left it. And for some reason, like I guess just because I was so small, that really struck me at the time. Like now, I don't think I'd think anything of it. That was kind of cool. Like something weird happened, but it affected me to the point where that house had a feel. It was a new house. My parents had it built. It's hard to say if anything was going on or if it was just kind of a local thing. My wife always tells me that I'm haunted, but
it could be a combination.
Yeah, she swears nothing ever happened to her until she met me. So I don't know.
It's convenient to just blame it all on you. But the pieces themselves, they were rearranged in a way that that you hadn't left them. But did it build something else?
No, yeah, I don't think it was anything that really stuck out as recognizable as like a message or like a, hey, I built this, look at this. It was just sort of like some blocks taken apart and put back together in a different way. When you're a kid, you've got a project, right? And it's like all you think about. It's like, that's your thing. I want to work on the thing again. So when I got home, I was taken aback that it wasn't the same as I had left it. And I knew that no one had been in the house. All four of us were gone. We didn't have animals, no animals at all.
So that was the first thing that got your attention. But how long after that did you start having recurring nightmares or just bad vibes in that house?
It wasn't long. The chicken or the egg, did I just start noticing things, or was I maybe a little creeped out and it kind of ramped up because I thought about it consciously a little more? I would have terrifying dreams about my sister's bedroom. And yeah, in my dreams, I would like walk by her room and I would fall down and it felt like something was like pulling me into the room. And it never obviously happened in real waking life, but it felt so real. It felt so vivid that, I would try to avoid her room. I would go to the other side of the hallway when I walked by her room and, scrape my shoulder against the wall as much as I could because, that was a visceral feeling. I mean, that feeling of something grabbing your ankles and pulling you into a room it's not comfortable. It's not good.
Did you ever see what it was? Did you ever see hands, or it's just this experience of being pulled in?
To tell you the truth, I don't even know that I felt hands. It was just like gravitational pull. Like I was going and I couldn't stop it. I was dragging onto the carpet, whatever. I just couldn't stop it. And I remember just feeling like whatever was in there, I didn't want to be in there with it, right? And get to the point where it would just be so terrifying that I would wake up. It never culminated in anything really frustrating if it were like a horror movie because you would never actually see the plot. But, what was that about? But I had that dream for years. I mean, we lived in that house until I was 11 or 12 years old. And I bet I had that dream 50 or 60 times. And like I said, it never happened the same way. It was always a little bit different. And I think that's another thing that stuck out. It wasn't the same dream just repeating. It was like something in my mind, in my brain at least, or that part of my brain when I was asleep, something was wrong with that room.
And just the room. And then once you'd moved out of the house, I think you said you had grown up in two different houses. Once you moved out of that house, it never really came back again.
No, not that feeling. I had a couple other creepy dreams here and there, but nothing like that. I mean, that felt so real. It was such a visceral feeling. Like I felt like I was going to be murdered in that room. Like it just felt horrible. Obviously, I took it a little bit differently than if I had the dream if I'm 44.
I'm experiencing a little that as we all age, how you interpret these things, being a kid and what you're into and how you look at it. And especially after a lifetime, or as you're older, as you start to get into your 30s and 40s, a lifetime of these experiences and what they start to mean. But what house was it where you had the incident when you were playing in your parents' bedroom?
Same house. Really, probably not long after that, because my sister still lived at home. She would have been 18 at the time when I was 7. I remember my parents had gone away and I'd always wrestle on their bed with all these stuffed animals I had. I was a huge WWF fan back then. I just loved wrestling. Fun, whatever.
Yeah.
I was in there wrestling around and I had a belt and everything. This is so vivid to me that, that's what I was doing at the time. And my sister walked around the corner, and I'm sure you guys remember like the 80s outfits. The tops 100% matched the bottoms. It's almost like a tracksuit, but not, And I can't remember the order. She was either wearing this black polka dots or black with blue polka. I can't really remember which way it went. But she was either wearing that one first, and then she had another one that was like red, blue, and yellow that I remember really well too. She walked in, and I'll never forget. She said, "What do you want for lunch?" Nothing felt off. Nothing felt odd. I answered the question. She left. And I mean, she walked back in less than 3 seconds later in a completely different outfit. Can anyone change that fast? I mean, is that a thing? Like,
Beyonce can, but there's like 30 people and she stands behind a curtain.
That struck me as odd. She walked right back in, completely different outfit, and goes, "Hey, what do you want for lunch?" And immediately, I didn't know what fight or flight was. Now I know.
Yeah.
My heart started to beat. Like it felt like I could hear it coming out of my ears, right? I didn't know what that was, but I knew something was off. Something was really wrong. Something was wrong with my sister. I didn't know if I was talking to my sister. I didn't know if I was talking to, I don't know. I mean, I don't really remember exactly what I was thinking, and just trying to like get her to admit to me that she had done that, or that she knew what was going on, or, I wanted her to explain it somehow. I just wanted to hear her explanation for how that happened. I mean, it was her twice. It was an exact copy of her. There was no difference. I mean, this was in my house. Like, that's what strikes me as like the most terrifying thing about that. It was such an innocuous, it wasn't like 3 a.m. I wasn't watching scary movies. I wasn't, I was just playing. It was like, it was lunchtime. This thing happened, and it clearly was something that happened. And that's really the time that I think started to look over my shoulder a lot, because it's different to have a dream. Okay. I mean, even as a kid, you have a dream and it's scary. Okay. You wake up and you're over it. But this was different because I was wide awake. And now I think that's part of the panic, because I'm like trying to get my sister to tell me what's going on, but I don't even know if I'm talking to my sister now. Like, I don't know. And it's one of those things that I'll never have the answers to that. I never will.
What we hear often with these stories, and of course, I think one of the first ones we came across where it was somebody we knew and had on the show was Lauren with the Bubby voice, where she sees her sister, but something was off. That was a haircut or she had a haircut that, that happened 2 weeks ago. Like, that was impossible. Or the voice didn't sound exactly right, even though it was a jokey voice that they used to do. Did you notice anything between either one that didn't seem right? Even though they're wearing different outfits, was the look exactly the same? Was the voices exactly the same?
I feel like they were. And, it all happened so fast. I think if I had that experience 20 or 30 times and, had documented it and really looked into it, I might have noticed a difference. But I don't know that being the first time, if I would have noticed a difference, especially if it wasn't her the first time. Because then I guess when I saw her come back in is when I first knew something was wrong. And it wasn't necessarily that something was off about one of her. It was just that I knew she couldn't walk out, change clothes, and walk right back in and ask the same question. I mean, she was just puzzled. Like, she had no idea. And I started to scare her after a while.
So the second one was the real sister, the one that stuck, and that outfit. As you say, she started to get kind of confused and annoyed. Like, why you keep asking me this? What was the result of that? Did you discuss it? Did you tell her what just happened? How did she react?
I know when my parents came home, I tried to tell them what happened. I'm 7, 8 years old. I mean, I'm not going to say they blew me off, but I think they tried to placate me a little bit, like, yeah, everything's okay. It's no big deal. Like, overactive imagination, whatever, you're playing too hard. I don't know. It felt like no one would believe me, and I'm like, I know what I saw. I mean, I 100% know what I saw. And this was with the dream, it was such a visceral feeling that there was no way this wasn't real. I mean, this happened.
Backing up just 1 second, they both asked you the same thing, roughly the same question, or a little bit different, or?
No, same. What do you want for lunch? I remember because at the time, my sister would make me what she called a fried bologna. It was just bologna and some cheese, and she would actually put it in the microwave, warm it up, and the bologna would kind of curl up, and it looked like a fried bologna. And that's what I wanted. I still remember that answer. I mean, I still remember that's what I wanted for lunch that day. I mean, this incident, it stayed with me. I guess every once in a while, it kind of floats into the back of your head. You don't think about it every day. But I mean, the details are so vividly clear to me that I just feel like there's no mistake. I didn't make a mistake. I know what I saw.
Right.
And that's the theme of everyone's story, right? Because you hear a story from someone else and it's impossible to know because you weren't there. When I hear other people's stories, I know, well, maybe they just saw that, and you start to like kind of discount it, not because you don't believe the person, but sometimes I think it's because it's something we can't really wrap our minds around.
No, it's too much. It's too much because it's impossible. And that feeling, like you said, it wasn't she came back as a monster, as the Gorn dressed in an 80s outfit. It was exactly her sister. It was a duplication of the mundane. But that was enough to like, that can't happen. So when you see that, it really twists the knobs in your head, I think. And you start to question everything. Have you ever had a fried bologna sandwich since then?
Yes, I have.
Okay.
I've progressed to actual fried bologna sandwiches, and
nice.
They're pretty good. Don't get me wrong, this is the care of me, but
I had one a month ago.
They're pretty good. Yeah.
My family has a place at the beach, and there's a little place down there called the Burger Shack, and it's one of their specialties, and they're freaking delicious.
I moved up here. I live in Northeast Ohio now. I moved up from Midwest Ohio, and I no longer can find, like the pounded out pork tenderloin. Can't find those anymore. Can't really find fried bologna sandwiches. It's very frustrating.
You know what's right around the corner?
Well, for one, the holidays, obviously.
Exactly. And that means many of us are about to do a whole lot of cooking, mostly for other people. And that often means, ironically, we're not always eating so well for ourselves when we're rushing around with our fall activities and putting others' needs before ours. Between all the shopping, the chopping, the prepping, the serving, the feasting, and then the massive cleanup, we're scarfing down whatever's around quickly just to keep our energy up. But with Factor, you can eat well with chef-prepared, dietitian-approved, ready-to-eat meals delivered straight to your door. It's like your own restaurant meal delivery service. You'll save time, eat well, and stay on track with your healthy lifestyle.
Hey, Factor is America's #1 ready-to-eat meal kit for a reason. Ready in just 2 minutes, you get convenience and wholesome nutrition. You save time while eating the meals you want, and the best part for us is that we're doing all this by eating super delicious food. And Factor's variety and quality keep us coming back. You can choose from over 35 weekly, flavor-packed, fresh, never-frozen meals that not only satisfy your taste buds, but meet your dietary goals.
Yeah, you can upscale your selections with Gourmet Plus options prepared to perfection by Factor chefs using premium ingredients. Say if you're anticipating a massive calorie load intake for the holidays, like I purposely am, and you want to mitigate the gain, you could try Factor's dietitian-approved Calorie Smart Meals with around or less than 550 calories per serving. Want to go the other way with exercise before the holidays and tone or build some muscle? Try their Protein Plus meals with 30 grams of protein or more per serving. Factor can help give you an extra boost to support your wellness goals and feel your best as you tackle a busy autumn.
And with Factor, you can rest assured you're making a sustainable choice. They offset 100% of their delivery emissions and source 100% renewable electricity for Factor's production sites and offices.
This October, get Factor and enjoy eating well without the hassle. Simply choose your meals and enjoy fresh, flavor-packed meals delivered to your door. Ready in just 2 minutes, no prep, no mess.
Head to factormeals.com/AL50, that's AL50, and use code AL50 to get 50% off.
That's code AL50 at factormeals.com/AL50 to get 50% off.
Forrest and Scott, thank you for supporting their sponsors. I'm Kate Trammell. Now back to the show.
So that was one bizarre incident. I think we're doing a count here. If this was a video, a YouTube show, we'd have a big number 2 posted on the screen because we're going to come up on number 3. Now, in this case, we're talking about 2 or 3 years later, right? After this happened with your sister. Is this a different house?
No, same house. She had moved out by this point. So I was, I was basically an only child in that house. I remember this really, really well too, because they're like quantifying events, I guess you would say, around it. We were watching the Final Four. I remember watching, I think it was Duke and UNLV were on TV at the time. But it was around Easter. We were going to color Easter eggs. We had all the stuff out. That was like the little pause.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah. This is what I love about these stories too, is these anchoring events that make it real or more real somehow. And in this sense, this is a house, again, very well, but this time you're outside in your treehouse, right?
Yeah, I was in a treehouse, and my dad built me a really, really cool treehouse when I was a kid. I mean, it stood on 4 legs. It was, it had concrete, it was in the ground. It was good, it was solid, right? And so I'm climbing up in this thing, and there were windows on all 4 sides of the treehouse. There's a big door. I guess you didn't have the most visibility, but you could open up windows on each side, and you could see everywhere around the treehouse. I mean, there were really no blind spots, right? So I'm up there, and I don't know what I'm doing. I'm probably who knows? I'm just passing time. I was a kid. And I hear my neighbor's voice. And, he said, hello, Chad, whatever. And I'm like, oh, that's my neighbor. I don't want to say his name on the show, but I know his voice. That's my next door neighbor. So I said, oh, hello, how are you? And he goes, what are you doing for Easter? I'm like, oh, we're going to color eggs. And I'm starting to answer. But like, while I'm answering, I'm looking out the windows and I'm like, where is he? It sounded like it came from over here, right? And I'm looking and I'm like, he wouldn't have asked me what I was doing for Easter and just sprinted back to his house. That's weird, right? So I'm looking for him and I'm like, I said his name a few times. I'm like, where are you? And it stopped responding to me. It was almost like when it picked up on the fact that I picked up that there was a problem, it stopped responding.
Right.
I can't slide under the radar anymore. It's so hard to like really pinpoint what or why. But now that's the second time that's happened to me where something has mimicked someone that I know. And I didn't know anything about a mimic back then. I didn't know to think anything of it. I was terrified. And on top of that, I'm 11 steps up in this treehouse or whatever. And, now you have to formulate the courage to go down the ladder. It's not just running away, right? Like, I don't even remember if I hit all the rungs on the ladder. Probably not. But I remember sprinting back into the back. And this time I was really upset. Like I busted into the back door crying. I was like, okay, something's wrong. Something's going on. And again, that was an experience where no one was there. No one experienced it with me, right? So my parents are like, it was like to the point where I think my dad went over and asked my neighbor, like, hey, you weren't in our backyard. He probably looked at him like he was crazy. This is the nicest guy in the world,
This was an adult neighbor.
Yeah.
And a pastor, I think, right?
He was a pastor, yeah. I mean, this was a serious person. He wasn't going to come play a prank on a 10-year-old kid. It wasn't on his radar, right? He wasn't trying to be creepy. It was, just a nice conversation I would have with my neighbor. It was a normal conversation.
Right.
It didn't strike me as odd until I started looking out the windows and I couldn't find him.
Was there a fence between your backyards, between his and yours?
No.
Right. That's kind of the impression I got, because you were like, could he have sprinted back to his house? So basically, it was sort of a common area between whatever. You guys didn't have anything on the property line that would have prevented him. Or prevented you from seeing him necessarily. It's not like you look down and there's a 6-foot wooden fence that if he was up close to it, you wouldn't see him or anything like that.
A couple small fruit trees, but that's it.
Right. When he asked you questions and you answered, was there any building upon your answers, or did it seem like just a list of random questions? Was it a real conversation is what I'm asking?
Yeah, it felt like it was just, there were no follow-up questions, if that's what you mean.
Right.
Yeah, there was no like, oh, you're coloring eggs. Mm-hmm. How many eggs? What color? Nothing like that. It was just like, basically like, hi, Chad, how are you? And I was like, hello, neighbor. I'm good. How are you? He's like, what are you doing for Easter? I'm painting it. And this is like, I think there were only a couple of questions. I can't remember any other questions, to be honest with you. Again, the fight or flight feeling kind of kicked in, and some of your senses, I think, go away a little bit when it's extreme enough, right?
Right.
So I don't necessarily remember what I was thinking about. I remember panicking again and trying to find him. It was more of a sense of panic this time because I was out isolated away from my house.
Right.
The first time it was weird. I was in my house and it was a little terrifying because it was, very bizarre. But this time I'm in the backyard. There's no help back here, right? My 10-year-old brain is like, is this the thing that tries to pull me into my sister's room? Like, I don't know. I have no idea. I don't know if they're related. I have no idea.
So was a building upon or a ramping up of what you said was that dizzy, confused feeling?
Yeah.
Yeah. Just not right. Like, this is what's going on here.
Yeah. And sometimes it's funny because I look back on that now and I know what I know. And sometimes I know that when people have experiences, you can get those feelings.
Mm-hmm.
If the atmosphere changes or whatever, some people are very sensitive. They get dizzy, they get lightheaded, they feel sick. And I sometimes wonder, was it fight or flight, or was it that significant of an experience where I was actually feeling that presence? I mean, I don't know.
Well, here's what I would say to people. It's like, well, that could be a trigger or a side effect of a panic attack coming on, but one preceded the other. It's not like you started to feel this panic and then you heard the voice. The voice triggered this same feeling. And did you think immediately after this was happening and you're scrambling down the ladder and running to the back door, did you connect it immediately to that incident with the sister's doppelganger?
I don't think I had yet.
Right.
All I could think of at that moment was that this thing was like hot on my heels and it was going to catch me. Mm-hmm. Right. Like I had to run. That was it.
Yeah.
Once I got in the house, I'd be fine. I don't know why that was the barrier. It clearly could get in there and do whatever I wanted. But yeah, I thought once I told my parents it was going to be fine. So I just wanted to get inside.
Well, now we're going to drift a couple of summers later. And this is another house. This is a house that your parents are building from scratch out in the country.
Yeah. Yep.
And now we're up to High strangeness incident number 4.
This is the first time, I think, where I had actually seen something. Well, it is the first time where I had seen something in front of me. I mean, I was looking at it. Like I saw something that wasn't right. My parents were basically building a house next door to my best friend's family. We played Little League Baseball together, all that stuff. It was really exciting that we were going to be neighbors now. I'm thinking about like a lot of these shared experiences that I had, because this one is a shared experience. Some of the shared experiences, I've kind of fallen out of touch with these people. And I don't know that, obviously things happen, time passes. But I thought about that this morning as I was thinking about like talking with you guys. I'm like, I don't know. Sometimes I wonder if like we were just maybe uncomfortable talking about it with each other to the point where things just sort of fell apart eventually, you know?
It happens though. I mean, just a natural drifting apart. You know, you start to develop different interests than you when you were 12 or 13, but you had a shared experience. This is also very common as well. And sometimes it's very traumatic. 2 of the cases that we came across were people that, well, and himself, Terry Lovelace, again, I'm mentioning him, he and his best friend, when you experience something that dramatic and traumatic, you couldn't be friends anymore. Not that Terry didn't want to. The other, his best friend, couldn't handle it. And 2 of the stories that were in his second book, you know, it estranged 2 sisters who were very close. And there was a case of firefighters in Texas who used to go hunting, and they all saw something and had something really strange happen, and they couldn't be around each other again. But it was just too much for them to be all together again. I'm not sure if this reached that level, but when you were playing around, and now we're talking about this house, and again, this is, how far away is this new place out in the country from the old house that was haunted?
It's a 5-minute drive.
Right. But in this place, there's poured concrete. There's a hole for a basement, a dugout basement. And what was being built at the time was, or half finished, I guess, was a pole barn. It was about 80% done.
Yeah. So I think 3 of the sides were up of the sheet metal, and the back was wide open. They just hadn't finished that yet.
Right.
And my neighbor's house was built. It was, 100% up. They were living there. It was good. And they had a pole barn as well. So all we had on our side of the property was just, the concrete was poured for the basement. And then, like you said, the pole barn, which was mostly finished. So for some reason, I don't know why, we were always playing some kind of sport. But we almost never played soccer, but we were in the pole barn playing soccer. And the deal was, if you scored a goal, the other person had to go get the ball because you were either kicking it out of the door or, out of the back of the ball. So he scored on me or whatever. And I tried to cheat. I tried to lean between the frame of the pole barn. I didn't want to get all the way out for some reason. I have no idea why. But I remember as I started to reach for the ball, I saw a shadow coming around the corner of the barn. And I thought, oh, well, it's whatever. It's my neighbor. He's okay, good. You're going to grab the ball. I don't want to do this anyway. I went to reach and I looked at the shadow. And the first thing that I noticed was the shadow just came from nothing. It was a shadow on the ground, I should say, not an upright shadow. It was a shadow that was cast on the ground. And 2 really, really bizarre things that have always, it still gives me chills to think about these 2 things. First of all, it went from feet to head toward the sun, toward the light source. I've scoured. I have listened. I've read. I have tried to find a story where someone had an experience just with that little detail that matches. And I've never heard anyone specifically say that. Not that I think I had a one in a life, but I've been looking for someone else that's experienced that. Because that to me, even at the time, that just felt different. That felt wrong, very, very wrong. And then on top of that, the way that it moved, it was like I was looking at it through a glass of water. It just, the water had a little bit of a sort of it was sort of there on our plane maybe, but not all the way enough to cast a shadow the wrong way. But I don't know. I froze. I 100% froze. It's the first time in my life that I saw something. My brain eventually said, that's not right. That's not a normal thing that you see every day. Just sit here and stare at it like a dumb person, right? I just stood there. I didn't know what to do. My neighbor ran. He left me. He was gone.
In that fight or flight mode, which you've now experienced several times, at least 3 here in your young life. To be clear, though, what we're talking about, the description of this, is imagine if a person is standing on the ground, it's a nice sunny day, clear skies, and the sun is behind them. What you would expect is the shadow starts at their feet and progresses towards you or in the line of the sun, right? Like anything else normal, like a sundial, anything else, the shadow starts at their feet And depending on the angle of the sun, will determine the length of the shadow. What you're saying is there wasn't anything casting this shadow.
Nothing. It just came from, I could see where the feet were supposed to, or whatever, I guess the bottom of it were supposed to be.
Yeah.
I guess it would have been standing there. But even that is a little deceiving because with the shadow going the wrong way, I don't know.
Right. When you say the wrong way, though, the head is not towards you. The feet are. So then the sun is out of the wrong position, is what you're saying, to cast that shadow.
Yeah, basically the back of the barn faced the west, and it was later in the evening. It was probably 7:30, 8 o'clock. The sun, it was still summer. The sun was setting. And I mean, it went right toward the light source. It went from feet on the ground to head all the way toward the sun, like from feet in the east to the head in the west.
And your friend, to be clear, he saw it too.
He saw it. Yeah. He didn't admit it right away.
Did he come over? Was he trying to help you with the ball or whatever? Or did you, because you froze up, what drew him over to where you were?
I think he was just laughing at me because I was laying in between the frame, the boards of the frame.
Okay.
And I think he just came over to watch me struggle, to be honest with you. Like he just
right.
Yeah. I mean, that's what friends do, right? Like he just scored a goal at me and now I'm struggling. He's going to come rub it in. And he just happened to be there and he saw the shadow as well. And he didn't admit to me, like I said, right away that he had seen it. But I knew something was up because he ran, and I didn't say anything. I couldn't. I just froze. I mean, I absolutely froze when I saw it. And the first move that I made was to try to stand up and I hit my head on the board above me. And I tripped, I think. It felt like a cartoon. I mean, you watch people in horror movies run away from like the killer and you're like, what are you doing? Stay on your feet. Just run. Right. And my face was so much heavier than the rest of my body at that point. I don't know what happened. Like I couldn't stand up.
Last week, I watched a clip on TikTok or somewhere of a sea lion rushing someone on the beach, and they tripped like 5 times. And eventually the sea lion caught them and attacked them, which was hilarious to watch. I'm sure it was scary being the person. All right, but here in the story, you also mentioned some facts about the shape of the shadow. Like, what did it look like to you?
This is tough for me because it's all just, I'm guessing at it. It was just the way it was bulky looked. I feel weird even saying this, but I mean, it looked like, it was like the shape of like either the shadow of like the head of a lizard, like an iguana, or I mean, almost, sometimes I hesitate to say this, but it almost looked like a large Native American headdress, the way that it was like, it was big, it was significant. It was definitely, the head was every bit as wide as the shoulders. That's why I think it looked like something was there. And it almost felt like as it walked, maybe that was like some of the undulating, like some of that was, as it hung down, it was moving or something. I don't know. It was such a creepy moment.
It was kind of not smooth. It was glitching around.
Yeah.
And what came to my mind in that moment is something Scott and I have talked about. And this is one of the ideas that has been going around with specifically UAPs, and the visibility / invisibility of them is something like a shadow cast from a 4th dimension into our 3rd. And I think Scott can maybe, I don't know if you can, don't want to put you on the spot, but can you talk about that?
Well, I took this away from, I think it was Grush who said this in the congressional UAP testimony. Right. It was a very short sentence that he said, and it was like the first time that I understood how something might be represented from the 4th dimension to the 3rd. And it was about that sort of the casting of light. And then how can something defy physics? And the first example that flew into my head is like when you're wearing a watch with a crystal face, a shiny glass face, and you go out to the restaurant with your friends or your girlfriend or your wife or whatever, and you notice the sun is catching it and you can do crazy. Of course, you immediately put it right in their eyeball. Everybody does this, right? You put it in the eyeball, but you can also fly it around really fast. And that reflection is defying the laws of physics because it has no physical mass. It's just a reflection. And I felt like sort of what Graves was saying was that was like what these projections are. And that's why they can seem to defy physics. And of course, we're getting a little UFO-y here, but like, because they are reflections from the next dimension that we don't understand. And it's much easier to manipulate them from outside of our dimension. But the further step would be from a technological standpoint is that there's an ability for the reflection to be more than a reflection. It may have some sort of physical form, whether it's organic or drone-like or mechanical or whatever. So this idea of like when you're seeing these things, maybe they are shadows from the next dimension. It sounds completely crazy, but it's just like, it's crazy as you feel when you say, well, reptile, it's like, okay. My other question for you though is, and I probably would have been too freaked out to remember this if I were you, but you didn't happen to notice any physical, like any depressions in the ground where it was or anything going on. It was more of a mist type thing that wasn't really interacting with the environment in any other way.
Yeah, no, I don't remember seeing like any grass move under footsteps or anything like that.
So it's not like it's something physical that's cloaked, for example.
No, I didn't get that impression. I really didn't. I got the impression that whatever it was somehow missing, but its shadow was there. It didn't feel like it was there.
Right.
Well, I guess in a way it did because I ran from it, but I don't know. I think this was like the last thing I would run from in my life. This was where I started to learn, like, nothing's chasing me. Stop running.
Right.
Yeah, it was terrifying. I mean, like you said, but yeah, I don't remember seeing specifically it like physically interacting with the environment, right? Other than the shadow.
Right.
But when it came around the corner from the back of the barn, was it headed towards you or was it just doing its own thing?
I don't know.
Okay.
At that point, it could have just been taking a walk. Maybe that had been its land. We were just building a house there, and it's like, oh, there are people here. This is usually the time where I'm okay. I have no idea. I don't know. Maybe it was just doing its own. Maybe it was completely innocuous,
Have you ever read The Scary Green Pants with No One Inside Them by Dr. Seuss?
No.
Oh, I grew up with that book. It scared me to death when I was a kid. Glowed in the dark, too, by the way. Pick that up later. Let's keep going.
Yeah.
Just to wrap up this weird anecdote in a bow, your friend beats you to the back door of the garage because he said the house is locked and he won't let you inside. And that's kind of funny, but not in the moment. Listen, I can understand this as a kid too. There's something banging on the door. Let me in. You don't know if it's you or this thing.
I wouldn't have let me in. I completely understand. Listen, self-preservation is an instinct that I possess. I understand. Like, I get it. I completely understand. I get it. Like, you don't have to be, faster than everybody. You just have to be faster than the last person, right?
Exactly. That's what they say about grizzly attacks. He does let you in eventually, and you guys are in there cowering because the main house is locked and you have to wait for the parents to come back, right?
Yeah. I mean, they probably weren't gone for more than a half an hour or 45 minutes, but it felt like a couple of weeks at that point. Like, it was harrowing, like we were in that garage, like, we're never going to see our parents again. We were scared. And mostly I remember like asking him, like, what do you think that was? And he's like, I don't know. I don't want to talk. I don't know. I didn't say anything. I don't know what you're talking about, and I'm like, okay, well, and I think actually looking back on that, it was a lot closer to the other experience now that I'm like putting the timeline together. When you look back years and things get muddled, but yeah, I think it was a lot closer. Like, this may have been like a couple of months after the treehouse incident, to be honest with you. Like, now that I really think about it, it could have been closer than that.
Yeah. How did the adults react when you told them?
The way you'd expect. And again, nothing against them. It's just, what did they walk into? They went out for dinner or whatever and came back to, we're a mess on the garage floor. Like, so they just thought we had an overactive imagination. It's a big property. We're not used to it. It's getting dark. We heard something that spooked us. Oh, it's probably a deer, not a deer, but it was nothing I have ever seen. Obviously, I've never seen anything cast a shadow from nothing before. So it's, I don't know that exists in the real world as we know it, but it was terrible.
Yeah, I mean, here's as you brought up, and I thought it was a great point. When you tell the parents and they thought they didn't believe a word of your story, but they may also, like your friend there, be in a bit of denial because you've just decided to build houses here.
Yep.
And if there's something creepy glitching around from another dimension out near the pole barn, now you got to live with it. There's no wrapping all this up and taking down the tent. This is it. And we don't want to hear anything weird traipsing around.
Yeah, there's no return on that investment. You're stuck with that.
Yeah.
And I guess if you're into that sort of thing, that's fine. But usually with small kids, that's not a thing that you want to hear. I understand. Again, I don't blame them for blowing us off.
Right,
I mean,
I
just think they didn't want to really confront that possibility.
Well, who does? Yeah, exactly. Except for maybe Scott and I don't know. But it would be years before something else strange would happen. And now you're becoming an adult. You're college age, right?
I was probably 22, 23, maybe just finishing up with some of the college stuff. I was working at the bar, small little bar, really intimate little bar around the railroad tracks. It was just like a cool little spot on Main Street. A couple of different things happened here, but this is like the village of Ada. This is like the weirdness of the village of Ada, right? One thing I can remember working in the bar, we hired a new bartender and we were kind of going over some of the closing things. And I'd worked there for about 6 or 8 months at that point. So I was showing her how to close out the bar. And I remember I made the comment to her. I was like, the ink in the register is a little low. It's going to be tough to see. And as soon as I said it, the lights right above us popped on. The 2 little bank of lights on that side of the bar popped on. We're the only 2 in the bar. It's closed. I mean, we're it. That's it. Doors are locked. There's no one in this bar. it creeped her out right away. She's like, what was that? I'm like, I wouldn't worry about it. It's helping. Thank you. You know,
Yeah.
it's obviously really bothering her. I'm like, okay, well, let me just go check the light switches. Like maybe it was just something with the lights. So I walked over to the light switch that was near us and I flipped it up and the lights stayed on. And then I flipped it down and the lights went off. So I thought that was really weird that it should have reacted to the first switch flip, right? Like it should have turned off from being on if it had physically turned to the on position. And there were two switches. There was one in the front, one on the side of the bar. I went and checked them both. They were both fully down or up, whichever direction they needed to be off or on. They were fully in that direction. I still have no idea why those lights popped on. I mean, again, that's the thing I'm never going to get an answer for. That wasn't creepy at all to me.
Right.
I actually really appreciated that. Like, it was like right when I said, hey, I need some help, and some help happened. And you don't question that. You just take it. That's not high strangeness. That's high helpfulness. And I'm here for that.
You're working late nights and you're kind of a night owl, it seems to me. And so is your girlfriend at the time.
Yeah. She would come in and study all the time. She would come in and sit at the bar. Sometimes we used to be so slow when I first started there that she would literally sit at the bar and study. Eventually it picked up and she couldn't do that anymore, which is good for me. But one night we went home for a break. I think it was again around Easter. And we came back anyway, and we were the only ones in her apartment. And we had the radio on, no big deal, just local radio station. And everybody that lived in the apartments around her would have been home. This was a Saturday night. School was out of session until Tuesday. So most people probably weren't going to come back until Sunday night, Monday at the very late, around that time. We were back Saturday. And we were in her room and just, kind of unpacking things and getting ready to do whatever we were going to do. I think we were going to go to dinner. And we had the radio on, and the radio just starts turning up. And not only were the numbers going up, you could feel the knob. I went over to the knob and grabbed the knob, and I could feel it turning. That was so weird to me because I felt like in that short little moment, like I interacted with something, and I grabbed the knob and I held it pretty tight and I turned it down. And then we turned the radio off. And I remember we were like, it was unsettling, but it wasn't like a terrifying thing. But fast forward to another night when I was working and she's in there by herself and she's going to take a shower. And she is in the shower and the radio does the same thing to her while she's in the shower, which to me, that's like, it can't get any more vulnerable.
It's rude. You have to let the shower dry off. It's like you could choose not to answer the phone, but it's going to stop ringing after a little bit. And this is not going to turn itself down until you get out. So yeah, not very considerate.
And that kind of thing is very unsettling for me.
Sure.
Just the static on the TV or the the computer that pops on at 2 a.m., whatever. That for some reason that kind of stuff gets me. That happened to her, so she called my friend and she made him come over, and she came up to the bar and she was like, she wasn't okay.
Yeah.
And this is my wife. Like, she's like a rock. She is a very reasonable person. She's not. Again, it wasn't like she came to me with these things. Like, she claims this never happened to her until she met me.
Right.
So she comes into the bar and she's not okay. She's not herself. I thought something physically, I don't know. You see your girlfriend walk in with that face and it's unsettling. And so she told me what had happened or whatever. And my friend is looking at me like, I don't know. Like, I wasn't there. I have no idea. I don't know. I don't know what's going on. I don't know why I'm here. And he was just very confused. She sat up at the bar and she was like, not even dressed to go out. I think she had still like a robe on over like a shirt and like some sweats. And it was just like, I'm done.
Yeah, you just got to get out of there for the moment. But she didn't leave the apartment. You guys still stayed there. And then, as you were saying, you were used to late nights. You'd stay up much later than the rest of your friends. And I think you guys would stay up late watching movies or something until 3:30, 4 in the morning. And what was happening on this particular night? Because this is now some time after the shower knob incident.
It's about 3 a.m. and it was a warm enough night that we had the windows open, and her apartment was right on Main Street. Literally walking distance from the bars. So I would get off work, go right upstairs, and that's it. We'd just hang out there for a little bit. So again, we're watching a movie, and I think most of us were kind of drifting in and out of sleep a little bit. I was wide awake because I had just worked a full night at the bar. So about 3 a.m., you hear the dinging of the railroad crossing, right? No big deal. Absolutely not abnormal at all. I did notice at the time that I didn't feel or hear a train coming. Usually you kind of feel or hear that coming because it's a small town. But I heard the ding, 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 ding. And right about after the dinging of the crossing arms, power everywhere. In our apartment, Main Street, even all the floodlight, like all the secondary lights that are on Main Street that normally come on, everything went off. Every single thing went out. And it was like one of those power outages where you hear it. I was like, dude. Just like it audibly shut down. Nothing. And it's Main Street, Yeah, it's a smaller village, but I mean, they did have the emergency. I mean, there were some lights that were out there that always came on. I don't know if they were running on a generator. I have no idea how that worked, but usually there were emergency lights on Main Street, and it was pitch black. I mean, you couldn't see anything, and it stayed that way. It just stayed dark for maybe about enough time, creepily, for a train to go by, 2 or 3 minutes, and then ding, 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 ding. The crossing arms went back up, and like the order of this is is the crazy thing to me. Then the power came back on, and I was like, "Hold up! Like, why do the crossing arms
Still have power.
stay lit
Yeah.
the entire time? Why did that happen?" Like I didn't understand that. It bugged me so much that I was like, "This is like an earworm for me. I need to know the answer to this question." A friend of mine, I would consider him a friend. He came into the bar almost every day and ate lunch, and I worked a lot of days there as well. So I asked him, he worked for the village. He was, village maintenance. He did all kinds of things for the village. He was one of the, higher up guys as far as like the maintenance department went. He knew everything about that village. I mean, everything about the way that place ran, he knew, right? So I asked him, I said, "Hey, does this make sense to you?" I said, "This is what happened to us, Saturday night, the arms, the power, nothing happened, no train." He goes, "Wait a minute, what?" And he goes, "What are you talking about?" I said, "Well, I mean, is that normal? Like when you guys shut the power down, wouldn't the emergency?" He goes, "Yeah, but why were the arms were flashing and nothing else was on?" And he's like, "Are you sure you're okay?" He kind of gave me a hard time.
Right.
But I eventually got him to come around and be like, "Listen, I'm serious. Like this is the thing that happened. Like I really want to know the answer to this. Like, is that normal?" And he finally did admit to me that he had no idea how what we heard or saw could have happened.
He did not experience any power outage.
Well, no. And I think it was 3 a.m. and he was sleeping maybe. I don't know.
Sure.
But, being that he was who he was, I mean, if something major would have happened, I would think he would be one of the first ones to be notified about it.
Right.
And he had never heard anything. He didn't hear it. Obviously it happened, right? It's a thing that we all saw, but I just don't know if, the town was just asleep. It's 3 a.m.
Right.
and probably 95% of the people are, in their beds asleep
Right.
and maybe didn't notice it until they woke up in the morning and their clocks were flashing. Oh, okay, well, whatever. You don't really think about it. But it was just way creepier than a normal power outage, with the crossing arms. I think that's what got me. It's weird.
There's 2 things about it. One is, and of course, upon reading that, the first thing I thought was the scene in Close Encounters. But that's a lot more, for movie's sake. It's, things are rattling, mailboxes are, shaking and flying open. All the stuff is coming out of Richard Dreyfuss's ashtray in his pickup truck. It's all going crazy. He gets a sunburn. This is basically pretty mild, except the arms come down and there's no train.
How busy were these tracks? Like Forrest and I, we traveled to Flagstaff. There's double tracks there. There's trains about every 10 minutes racing through town.
Yeah.
But this looks like maybe a smaller track. Is it, what's the story with this, how busy these are?
I mean, it's a pretty sleepy town. I don't remember, the exact run, but I know the biggest problem there is there was a grain depot not very far away. So the biggest problem you would have is during the day, sometimes the train would stop on the tracks, so they could load or whatever. You'd have to go a couple crossings down to go around. It was never very long.
Oh, sure. Yeah.
Yeah, it was just a short, like maybe 8 or 10 car train or whatever. That was usually the biggest problem. I mean, it wasn't like a frequent situation where a lot of trains came through. In fact, I remember one night we had a really big snowstorm and I worked at the second bar. And I had been in there for hours and they had been plowing snow all night. And for whatever reason, I remember the owner of the bar came running in from the outside. He's like, "Hey, there's a train coming. You guys got to see it through the snow. Come on." And we all ran out from behind the bar and watched the snow get like exploded all over the street. It was really funny. But, I've been here for like 3 hours and that's the first train that's come through all night. That's really weird, So I don't. Yeah, not that often. I mean, to be honest with you, not that often.
No missing time, nothing else that was odd that you remember about that. Just no train.
No. Yeah, every moment of that, it's very vivid. I mean, it's just thought it was weird that you heard it, then the power went out, and then you heard it again, and then the arms went up, and then the power came back on. I thought that was weird.
Did you ask anybody else, your friends, like, "Hey, did you notice the power going out? Was anybody else up?"
Yeah, no one was up. No one noticed it. Yeah, no one, because the town, like a lot of the campus is really far away from the tracks.
Right.
So unless you lived right up there around like where the bars were in those apartments, I guess you really wouldn't be that close to the tracks.
That makes sense. You probably wouldn't have talked, of course, that happens naturally where I live. And how, if it happens in the middle of the night and I'm sleeping, when you wake up and the clock is flashing, reset the clock again. And that's how or something's off again. But you didn't have that. Nobody else mentioned it. It was just localized to you, it seemed.
Yeah, and I'm sure the power went out for everyone. I mean, I'm sure everyone had to get up and change their clock, but I don't think, like you said, it wouldn't have been anything that you would have noticed. I mean, we live out in the country now. The power goes out all the time, you know?
Right.
Yeah.
It's no thing. It's out for sometimes 10 or 15 minutes, comes right back on. You're like, okay, go set the clocks. That was cool.
Yeah.
But it doesn't, it never, I don't even notice it. You know, it just happens and that's it.
Were these things happening at Little Mexico, and is it still around?
No, Little Mexico is not there. Like I said, in that picture that you saw, it had become Tavern 101.
Right.
Yeah, Tavern 101. Yeah.
I think it's not even a bar now. I think, I'm not sure what it is now. It's been so long since I've been back there.
But this is your sixth and final story. You're flashing the number 6 like a Sesame Street
so far.
count.
Let's go.
Yeah,
with
so far.
Yeah.
Number 6 here takes place at the same bar. And how long after, though, the train incident did this happen?
Gosh, you know, this is tough for me. I don't know. It's hard sometimes to put that into time. It just sort of happens, you know? And it's like, okay, it might have been summer, it was warm. I can't remember if it was spring. I feel like class was still in session. So the train thing was probably April, May, you know, toward the end of the school year.
Right.
This experience, I think this was during the summer. So maybe 3 or 4 months after the train. I'm guessing. I'm totally guessing, but I know it was after.
Yeah.
This is by far, and I think I've had some very strange things happen, but this stuck with me more than any of these other incidents. I don't know. This was just a weird thing for me. Again, Monday night, very, very slow at the bar. Literally 2 people at the bar. One person works there. The other person is like one of our main regulars, right? Like there was no variation. Like we knew each other. The 3 of us knew each other very, very well. So we sat there. It was very quiet, laid back. You know, we're having a conversation no louder than this all night. We're watching TV. It was just nice. You know, it was no big deal. No hustle, bustle. It was just very chill. And a guy walks in, not ominous by any means. I mean, he was mid-20s, maybe a couple of years older than us, like 26, 27. And he looked like a typical college student, or there was a law school also associated with Ohio Northern. He looked like maybe he was a law student, you know, that age. He walked in and I remember it just, for some reason, I remember it felt weird. Like it felt off. I think at the time I was like, whatever, it's a small town. It's weird that I've worked at this bar for so long and I've never seen this guy. They both kind of turned around and didn't really know him and didn't really think anything of it. He just came in and sat right down. He just became another person at the bar. And he ordered a Budweiser. I remember that. We had these dollar bags of chips that were behind the bar. So he ordered a bag of barbecue chips. And, you know, I opened his beer and gave it to him. He gave me physical money. You know, I put money in the register and put his change on the bar. It was a flesh and blood person at this point.
And he had ID because you checked it.
And that's how I know he was 26 or 27. I knew that was ended up being his age. Yeah, because I didn't know the guy. I had no idea. And anytime you're in a small town and someone you don't know walks in, you're like, oh, we're getting checked. Like, we better card this guy. That's what you do. I wish I had thought to not look at anything. I just wish I had looked at something other than the birth date, right? And yeah, no Men in Black. I mean, you know, no skin hanging off or anything. He just, you know, had a normal, a button-up shirt on, a backwards, kind of a trucker cap. I mean, he was literally everyman, quote unquote. But again, it felt a little unsettling, not to the point where it was like, okay, something's really wrong. It was just like, that's weird. I don't know this guy, you know? So he opens this bag of chips and he takes a couple sips of his beer. And I mean, he proceeds to go at these chips like he has never eaten food in his life. Almost like he didn't know how to eat. He just shoveled these chips into his mouth. I've never seen a person eat like this. It was really, really strange. I mean, he didn't stop. I mean, he killed this whole bag of chips, right? Until it was gone. And he took a few sips of his beer here and there, and he got up with about maybe an eighth of his beer left in the bottle. It was still cold. The change was still there. The bag of chips was still on the counter. I didn't dare take them from him. I didn't know what he was going to do with it, so I left it there. He gets up and walks down the hallway to the restroom, and we still aren't thinking anything of it. We're just watching TV, and we kind of we shot each other a couple of glances when he got up, wow. You know, I remember the one bartender that was there, I remember her saying, I don't like that guy. But it wasn't I feel like something ominous is going to happen. I feel like it was just that guy ate those chips really weird, and that made me feel uncomfortable. I don't like that guy, you know?
Right.
She was a little taken aback, but I don't think she was scared of him or anything like that. It was just I don't like that guy, you know, that was weird. So he's back there, and time passes, and I don't really think anything of it, because I'm just, you know, I'm just hanging out with them. And my buddy, our regular that was there, he's like, hey, man, he's like, Chad, you you gotta go check on your boy, man. I gotta go to the bathroom. I don't know what's going on back. I'm like, oh yeah, he is still back there. I'm like, I totally forgot. And it's a very, very small, narrow building. There's nowhere inside this building that you can really get to that either I behind the bar or they sitting at the bar wouldn't have been able to see. Like, we had each other's backs covered, right? There's no crazy secret door or anything that was unlocked at that point that he could have used to get out of there. You couldn't leave the bar. So he goes back in the bathroom, and I'm like, okay, whatever, I'll go check. That's fine. You got to go. So I go back, knock on the door. Hey, buddy, you okay? No answer at all. And I'm like, hey, listen, like, I'm coming in. Like, if you're not okay or if something's going on, just say something, man. Like, whatever. Like, open the door. He's not in there. He's not in the men's room. And it's, like I said, small bar. I can actually go to the women's room. I can go to the door, and I can look through the kitchen, and I can see them sitting at the bar. I'm like, anything? Like, somehow maybe he had snuck by me. They're like, no. So I know she's not in the bathroom, but I still knock on the women's restroom door. I said, hello, is anyone in there? Nothing, no answer. And I said, hey, buddy, are you okay? Like, I'm coming in. I open the door, and there's no one in there. There's nothing amiss. There's no mess anywhere, nothing. And it almost looks like no one has been in either bathroom. So we have a few doors that are in the closet that are like, one's basically a storage closet. One was the office, and I think one was maybe just supposed to be part of the storage closet, but it wasn't you couldn't really get into that door. Basically, the shelves were all the way full out to the 3 doors that were the storage closet and the weird door that you couldn't use. And then the office was so tiny and cramped, but I opened all those doors and looked. I mean, I'm going to make sure, curious about where the guy is. And then we do have a back patio. We did have a back patio at that point, but there are 4 different locks with 3 or 4 different keys that you had to use to get to the back patio, because we had liquor and beer and coolers and all kinds of expensive stuff back there. So it was well locked. You couldn't have gotten there from inside the bar. So now, like, I don't know if I had the fight or flight feeling, but I remember like thinking like, okay, this is really weird. And so I go back up there. I'm like, hey, he didn't like come back down this hallway just now, did he? Like, he didn't, like, you guys didn't see him leave out of the kitchen at all, did you? And now my friend, the bartender, she's like visibly starting to like be uncomfortable, right? She's like, what is going on? I'm like, I don't know. He's not back there. And my buddy, the regular, is like, where'd he go? And I'm like, I don't know, but you're going to help me look for him. Like, we're walking around this building. We're going to find him, right? Like, you guys are in it now. So they left. I don't blame them again. I really don't blame them. It was uncomfortable and they had a way out. They weren't working.
And you check the ceiling tiles, people, because this is the other thing is that when you tell people a story like this, to make themselves feel better and safer, like they'll start suggesting everything. Like, well, did you check the ceiling tiles? Did you check under the milk crates? Did you check? It's like, yes, I checked everywhere.
And I did. I poked not all of the ceiling tiles, but a lot of them. And I had a flashlight. I was standing on a chair with a flashlight, like looking into the ceiling,
right.
Like, and there's no room up there. I mean, it was a drop ceiling with no window. There's no windows in the bathroom. The only window there would have been there was like a large at the front. I think you'll see it on Google Earth. There's like a kind of a plate glass looking kind of a window, whatever. It didn't open in any way. It just was a glass, solid window.
Yeah.
I mean, there's nothing he could have slid out of. And to be honest with you, the only way he could have gotten out was there was a little sliding window at the kitchen. But again, a human couldn't have fit through there. And second, if he somehow had found a way to fit through, they would have been sitting at the bar staring back into the kitchen. They would have seen him. Yeah, there's no way they could have missed. And I had the lights on in the kitchen because it was such a slow night that, everything was all lit up.
Mm-hmm.
There were no dark areas of the bar he could have regressed to and turned himself into a piece of paper and slid out of it. I mean, it was just wild. I don't get what happened there. It sounds so innocuous sometimes when I say it. And the more I tell the story, the more I think normal it becomes.
Right.
But it wasn't normal. Like at the time, I remember like when they left, it wasn't that I was uncomfortable, but I was like really unsettled in that bar, thinking that like not that a human was going to jump out and do anything, but that whatever this thing was in there.
To your point here, and this is what I was thinking about, is all these experiences are different. We've got a total of 6 so far. If I'm counting correctly. The first one, when you're a kid, it's like, well, the Legos are a different spot and they're put together a different thing, but maybe, that's not so weird. It's just unusual. You just you can easily forget that. Incident number 2 and incident number 6 here, the Vanishing Man, they have a similarity, I believe, as what I was saying, in that it wasn't lizard people that showed up at the bar. You didn't turn into a lizard. It wasn't your sister, a lizard person wearing your sister's clothes, it was extremely normal and what it should have been, except for a little twist. The first time there's a repetition, a duplication, an echo of your sister. That shouldn't have happened, but both were normal looking and the voice is normal. And certainly fried bologna sandwiches are normal. The third and fourth incidents, that was more normal, but again, a disembodied voice that is a voice or vocal doppelganger, that is very disturbing because there's nobody there. But again, it's a real voice. It didn't sound distorted. The shadow number 4, like that's really not normal looking. It's disturbing in its own way because that is a foreign looking just anomaly, something anomalous. The crossing guard, incident number 5, that's something that is a normal thing that shouldn't have happened that way. But again, you didn't see anything strange. But number 6 here, again, my point being is that the guy looked pretty normal. Everything on board is normal. I mean, anybody can just take a handful of chips and stuff them into your face as a prank. It makes me think of, that was the joke in, I think it was Mad Men, Patrick Fischler. He's a stand-up comedian. They're doing a commercial for this potato chip company, and that was the gag. Is he takes a handful and he just stuffs them in his mouth and he gives it a couple of bites, and that's the end of the commercial. And that's the funny thing, except this is not a joke. This is the way this guy's eating. It's like, okay, that's weird, but then he vanishes. That is way off the spectrum here and way off the dial, the rotating ghost dial, in that something that is so normal looking, I don't know if it's an uncanny valley thing, but something that is supposedly so normal then takes a weird twist, like the appearance of your sister or this guy, and suddenly now he's gone. That, I think, in its own way, really cranks up the feeling that this is wrong. This is paranormal. This is supernatural. Something's going on here. And then you take a sum total of all the stuff that's happened in your life. And it's like the question comes down to, what is going on?
I wish I could tie it up in a bow and say that, okay, in the meantime, I've gotten an email from the other side and they've explained it.
Right, yeah.
It'd be great. The weird thing about that last one, too, the Vanishing Man, it felt so personal. It felt almost invasive. Not that it was there for me, but it just felt weird. I mean, we had a financial transaction. Like the check was still on the bar. It was still somewhere there was, supernatural money in the register. Maybe I should have kept that. I don't know.
It's real money. Yeah. And where did he get it? And as you said, he knew how to use it. None of these concepts were foreign. He knew how to drink the beer. It's not like Scott, I love the story of the guy that doesn't really know how to cut his steak. Like, I just supposed to chew on this. What do you do?
Yeah, I can't even remember where we heard that story. It's about the guy that goes into a steakhouse in Manhattan, like in Midtown or something.
Yeah, it was a Men in Black story.
That was a Men in Black. Yeah, he's acting super strange and he gets a steak and it's like he doesn't know how to use the fork and the knife. And
there are other things that are much more weird. One of the stories that we came across, speaking of, like, again, I'm trying to go through my mental file cabinet here to try to find something that there's any correlations. And certainly there's a lot of stories of people vanishing. It's like if you talk about the reptilian things, and this was in David Weatherly's book, Strange Intruders, there was a report, a couple of people in this neighborhood reported on this family. They thought that they were reptilians in disguise. And when you read about it, it's comical and horrific at the same time. But there's telltale signs that happen with this. And just to go through these again, because this creeps me out personally, the woman of this family is out in the backyard mowing the lawn. Apparently her wig falls off and it's like you see in the movies in V, it's just green scales. And she quickly puts it back on. They never talk to anybody. They drive a beat up old car. One of the guys relating the story, and I think there's several people that confirm with this, at least in that neighborhood.
A lot of this sounds a lot like The Burbs.
Yeah, and it's like, I don't know if that's gives it credibility or not, but the details here they have to do, or they end up doing, because at some point it's like, look, we're not going to go to the nth degree here. We're still going to be ourselves in these costumes. Because the guy confronts him at the supermarket and his shopping cart is entirely filled with packages of meat. And he's like, oh, you gonna have a barbecue there, neighbor? Gonna have a backyard barbecue thing? And the guy just turns around and hisses at him. Get away. And so it's like, okay, cool. Just makes an inhuman sound. Just reminded me what flashed to my mind was part of that story is they go into the house after because they were only there for a short while, maybe a year, maybe a little bit over. They go in there. There's no furniture. The couple of pieces that there are like all chewed up. The toilet's been ripped out, and apparently they've just been going into the hole in the floor. There's a few really filthy, smelly mattresses on the floor, and the whole place, the floor is filled with those empty packages of meat. And if you don't rinse them out, they start to really smell bad. And you're thinking like, okay, that's off the chart here. If this is all true, these are not regular people. This guy's not like that. He's much more. I always remember this from film school and taking a class on Louis Buñuel, who's a famous surrealist. And his thing was the more disturbing something is the closer you can get a real life scenario in a film to subvert it. The surreality of the situation is ramped up by how normal it seems.
There was no feeling of like, this is paranormal or this is going to be paranormal. It was just when we couldn't find him, it was like, first off, is he okay?
Yeah. Well, yeah, you want to know what he's doing. Is he passed out? What he's having a heart attack? What's going on?
Right. You want to make sure he's okay. Second, you want to make sure we're not in danger, right? Is he thinking about like doing something? And then third, it was just like, there are no other options. He disappeared. He dematerialized. I don't understand it. I don't know how to explain that. And I'm so thankful because sometimes there were Mondays when there would have been no one there at that time. I'm so thankful there were other human beings there to see that.
That is pretty special. Well, as we start to wrap this up, of course, the big question is, now that we look at the breadth of all these stories, which I mentioned at the beginning, what do you think is happening with you specifically with your life? Why have you been shown these things?
I don't know. People always say you won't be handed what you can't handle, right? You won't be given what you can't handle.
Sure.
Yeah, I don't know. Maybe I don't know. Maybe I don't know. I wish I knew. It's funny because I keep trying to I'm trying to be introspective about this. And I'm trying to why me? I have no idea.
Yeah.
It's super weird to me because like you said, they tie together in that they're all paranormal experiences, but they don't really all tie together that well.
It's not like your typical abduction stories where, again, going back to Terry Lovelace, you see the monkeys come into your bedroom at night, and then you start to see saucers in the backyard, and then this happens, and it's a progression that makes a little sense. These are fairly disparate kind of weird things.
Yeah.
Do you think that you have more of an ability to see these things, or luck of the draw that you've just been exposed to, throughout your life, and you're not that old yet, and who knows what's coming down the pipeline? You're just in the right place at the wrong time, or vice versa.
Yeah, maybe it's a little bit of both. Like I've for whatever reason, I'm right place, right time, right place, wrong time, whatever you want to say there. For whatever reason, I do have whatever, because some people will experience these things and not notice them or not see them or not pick up on them or not, whatever it is. And I'm sure somebody asked me this one time when I told them about the mimicking stories, and I had never thought of it this way before, and it floored me, to be honest. Someone said, "Man, I wonder how many other times in your life that's happened to you and you didn't know." And I was like, "Oh, you ruined that."
The other thing that I thought about too was we're so busy telling these stories about this thing, and it was weird because it was a black mist on the stairs, or it had some weird quote and it said, "What a strange pair we make," or whatever that other quote was, Forrest. All these things that happen, and then you're like, okay, this is the marker for weirdness. It's like, what happens when these things are doing all this stuff and mostly trying to be normal?
Oh, yeah.
Would you even notice? And that's something that Forrest has told the story on the show a ton of times, so I'm not going to ask him to tell it again. But he was at Waverly Place on a lockdown and saw a weird guy walk in front of him with a baseball cap on, just like your guy at the bar.
Yeah.
Who then wasn't there. I guess what I'm saying is what happens when they decide that they're going to try to blend in? How often would we even catch it?
Right. Have they assimilated? We don't know. I don't know.
Yeah. Are you on high alert?
No. Nothing has happened to me in so long, and I'll knock on pretend wood so it doesn't show up on the recording, but nothing has happened to me in such a long time. It's been probably since, I would say, my mid-20s. I mean, it's been a long, long time since I've noticed anything big. A couple little things here and there that would easily be explainable as something else. So it's not, I don't really try to count them as experiences. It's just that was weird. Mm-hmm. You have to draw the line and set the filter somewhere.
What about your wife who says that you're haunted or whatever? Has anything happened? Has she been having any of her own experiences?
No, other than the shower thing, when the radio turned up when she was in the shower, that's it. I mean, that's the only thing that I can really think of that's happened to her where she's been isolated and by herself.
How about your kids?
Kids are funny because kids will say things sometimes like they saw a shadow going the wrong way when they were playing soccer, and you just say, "No, no, you didn't see that."
Right.
They've said a couple things, but they don't. I don't try to dismiss
The
it.
tables have turned. Dad doesn't believe it, even though it happened to him.
No, yeah, I try to, I try to ask questions. I try to like lead further into the conversation. And sometimes I think it really is just an active imagination. And sometimes, like my daughter has said a couple things where I'm like, all right.
That's the best that anyone can hope for. And I think because you've experienced that, not that they will, again, I think these are very specific and pointed often. It's like your sister lived in the same, she lived in that bedroom.
Yeah.
I don't think she ever had anything weird or felt anything weird.
No,
right?
not that she's ever admitted to me. She's never said anything about it. Yeah.
It's very pointed a lot of times and very personal and very emotional and intimate. A lot of these things, because it digs right into your very being. And it makes me wonder then if something happens, I think the best thing you can hope for is that you listen. It's like, okay, well, maybe I think, maybe you got some things wrong. I mean, you're only 10 or whatever. Like you haven't seen a lot of the world yet, but you're starting to come, stand on your feet here and understand things, and your comprehension's grown. So let's take that into account. But you listen, and it's like, okay, it's not just outright to not like, you kids, stop goofing around. And like, that's the last time you're going in the bar. And if you're going to do that,
I want my kids to feel like, I tell them all the time, hey, listen, you can come to us and tell us anything. And I want it to be the truth. I don't want it to be, well, sometimes it's hit or miss. No, I mean, it needs to be consistent. And,
now that this has all happened to you, would you like it to stop, or would you welcome more experiences? How would you feel about that?
As long as it leaves my kids alone and doesn't scare my kids, whatever happens, I'm fine with it. I'm to the point where it's fascinating to me. Not many things really make me feel that sort of fight or flight, scared, sort of like your blood boils for a second when you see it. I don't get that often anymore. And I think you guys will laugh. The last time I felt that, I was just talking to my wife about it. So we listened to the Sally House episode. And when I was a kid, I would have dreams that I would flip a switch and the light wouldn't come on. And in my dream, that would cause like this really like visceral, scared, like something's wrong. And I eventually turned that into like, I guess it would almost be lucid dreaming, because I would do it. And I'm like, okay, hold up. Nope, it's a dream. We're good. And then I would wake up. We finally listened to the EVP, long story short. And 45 seconds after we listened to it, one of our kids was up and they made a noise. I'm like, I'll go check on him. And I flipped the light switch on to the upstairs, and the upstairs light blew out at the exact second I switched it on. I'm like, really? Why did this just happen right now? And I'm sure it was a 100% coincidence.
Sure.
Like it didn't, but it gave me that feeling. Yeah. Like when I flipped the switch, I was like, ooh, I don't like that.
I'm sure it's a coincidence thing. I can just tell you, we have a long list of coincidences that have happened either before, during, or immediately after people have listened to the EVP, including a car accident.
Oh, wow.
So I don't second guess it. I don't know. Like I have said it on the show before, and I'll say it again. I think it has sophisticated metadata in it.
So yeah, and that's my point, is that it's very personal. It's very intimate. It's meant for you, or you're just there to witness it, and it doesn't care that you saw that. It's like the guy with the chips. It's like, did he really need a bud right then and a packet of chips? Could he just gone to the grocery? I don't know if there's a mini mart open, but just grab something and went back to his filthy mattress hovel with the hole in the floor, and that was fine. But like that was a choice to go in there with people witnessing that. And then, like I said, the other thing is that I don't know if he was called back to the mothership, what was going on here, but he could have he paid his money. He could just walked out like, thanks, bud. Sorry for the crumbs.
Yeah.
And beat it. But no, I got to get beamed up here, wherever he went to. So that was, in my opinion, on purpose. That was a furtive move, whether he's just doing his business or it's like, I don't care who sees me. It's like people get abducted and your shoes are on, terry socks are on backwards or on sideways, or your dress is on backwards. It's like, we're getting it close enough. That's all we're doing. That's all you get. Because we got other stuff to do.
No time for your socks.
Yeah.
There is that story too about the guy, and I've wanted to cover it on our show about people think it's just a kind of a true crime thing. But about a guy that went into a really busy bar and never came out. They have security cameras everywhere. and he never came out. They analyzed all the footage. I saw a whole Dateline on it a while back, and they're still
It
looking for
wasn't the
that
guy
guy.
from Columbus, was it?
I don't know where he's from. I can't remember. I've looked this up once before. I know there was an escalator that went up into the bar.
Yeah, that was Columbus. That was
Is
the guy
that
from
Columbus?
Yeah.
There you go. Of course it's Ohio. Of
course.
course.
And you know what I did when I saw that story? I was like, what does he look like? And I watched the videos. I'm like, hold up. Man, it wasn't my guy. But yeah, I was like, let me watch these videos. But no, this guy had an identity. They knew who he was, and he was an actual missing person. I don't know that anyone, obviously it's a small enough town. If someone would have come up missing, we would have heard about it.
Yeah.
It gives me goosebumps every time. Like when I think about a new angle or when I just tell the story, I get whole body goosebumps. It was really, really weird.
I'm glad, though, if it's going to happen to anybody, it happened to you where you have now been somewhat conditioned to this and don't fear it anymore. And you have a different attitude. Other people, this would unhinge them for the rest of their lives.
What would life be without mystery and wonder? If you knew everything,
I think that's a perfect way to go out on this one. Yes.
Yeah, I do too, Chad. Thank you so much for taking the time to come and talk to us and share your stories. For listeners that want to find your YouTube show, you want to give that another plug before we sign off?
Yeah. It's like I said, it's Come On Ref. That's a live sports show that I do. I kind of help out with the Ohio Media School. I'm like the de facto host of the show.
Oh, cool.
It's always kind of different guys. It's kind of fun. It's kind of fun to host the show. And that's every Wednesday morning, about 11 o'clock. We usually go live. And then my YouTube channel is Chat About Sports. And like I said, it's in its infancy.
Let us know if anything else happens. Well, we'd love to have you back. Thanks again for your time.
Thank you, guys.
All right. Stay safe and stay normal.
Hi, I'm Dustin Stevens. Scott and Forrest would like to thank you for listening to tonight's Astonishing Legends and want to encourage Indrid Cold to keep looking for the Mothman. He's still out there. Let's get back to the show.
I don't know about you, but there's one thing that's stuck in my mind. And weirdly, you and I know that we get a lot of strange coincidences sometimes when we collect stories like these and a lot of synchro mysticism kind of things, a lot of strange coincidences. And this one happens to be this kind of frantic, desperate feral eating.
Yeah.
I don't know why, but that's come up several times with this collection of stories. And I would rather not picture that in my mind, but it seems to be a theme this year. And again, just there's something and someone out there doing that. And please stop doing that.
It truly is bizarre. Also, the ghost train. We actually had a ghost train story not too long ago. In fact, it was in the True Halloween Stories Part 1 last year. There was a ghost train. Remember that in the cemetery?
Yes, the Phantom train wreck. Which the sound alone had them diving to the cold, cold ground. That's
nothing was
freaky.
there. Nothing was there.
Well, one of the ones I passed to you that came in this year, which I really like, but we're going to use it somewhere, is a train time slip story.
Oh, yes. Yes, I love that story.
I love that because of the interaction and I don't know, just the realness of it. But again, so we have plans for that one as well. Well, the story from our next listener comes from an entirely different field, and it's safe to say she's spent more time dealing with death than 99% of you out there listening right now. Well, for our next story, we were very honored to have on our next guest, Rachel, because this story is one that I think chilled all three of us, Scott, myself, and Tess, down to the core because of the nature of it. And it's a slightly different story. It does have to do with some things that we've talked on the show and a few other things that we never have or could imagine happening, and especially witnessing it. So we especially wanted to make sure we got this one in and get this down on record. And we're so thankful to you, Rachel, for generously coming on and sharing this story, because it's very personal in a way. It's very emotional, and it was probably very shocking at the time.
And I would also just like to say thank you for agreeing to come on. I emailed you at 6 a.m. my time this morning, or 6:30 in the morning, and fell back asleep after taking my son to school. And then when I woke back up at like 8, you were like, I'm in for this same day interview. So thank you very, very much for that.
Yeah, for sure.
So you're a listener to the show. How long have you been listening to Astonishing Legends?
I have been listening since the very start. I think it may have been a few months in and I was able to catch up.
Okay.
But it was just very few. And so I don't know why I got so sucked into it, but I was like the
Oh.
conversation and the way it, and you guys like get into the nitty gritty, and I appreciate that.
Well, thank you so much, and which lovely things to say, and we're glad that we can maybe repay you for that loyal listenership with this platform to get out this story that needs to be told. And it is, like I said, it's kind of heartwarming in a sense, also a cautionary tale.
So I thought I told more people this story. And when I was talking with my daughter this morning after I got your email, she said, Mom, you've never told me this story before. And I said, oh, okay. So I told her the story and she's like, oh my gosh, Mom, I just got chills. Like, this is kind of creepy. And I was like, okay. And then I texted my brother, who also is a longtime listener. And he's like, oh my gosh, I can't believe you're going to be on. He's like, how come I've never heard this story? And I was like, honestly, people don't like to hear about hospice work. I usually get you're such an angel for doing what you do, but let's not talk about it and we move on.
Well, to start with that, I would ask you, I mean, we can talk a little bit more about this and the roles that are played when it comes to hospice care. But as you probably have heard since you've been listening, that at the beginning of this year, we had on somebody who made quite an impression on Scott. And as somebody who is an end-of-life doula.
Mm-hmm.
And somebody who is right there at the final moments giving comfort and aid. And how is that similar or different to what you do? And if you would tell us your title.
It's very similar to what I do. I am a licensed clinical social worker. So I have my master's degree in social work. I'm convinced it's divine intervention. I ended up in hospice work because my mom was a hospice nurse growing up. And I was like, I will never deal with old people. Gross.
Right.
Never going to happen. And then just through the course of my undergrad work, where I did my internship with a hospice agency, and I fell in love with it. And they hired me right out of undergrad school. And so then I was able to go to grad school through hospice. And so my entire social work career has been with hospice. The last 5 years has been oncology specific hospice work. But I've always done hospice. And so I have sat bedside hundreds of people as they've died. A lot of it is providing comfort, psychological and emotional support to the patient, but most of the time it ends up being more the family. Oftentimes the patients are like, I know I'm dying and I'm okay with it.
Yeah, they're ready. Yeah.
And then it's the family that's really struggling. So I do most of my work with family members. I follow them for a year after the patient dies with bereavement support. I have had some patients that have been on long enough that we've established a really good relationship, or they've had some existential distress, where we've been able to work through that. And then just like the practical stuff of like getting them a funeral home, getting them additional care above and beyond hospice support. So that's what my role as a social worker is with the hospice team.
And you've been doing this now almost 20 years.
Almost 20 years, yeah.
And in all that time and the hundreds of people you've sat with in their final moments, that you're personally not afraid of death or the idea of dying or the process of dying, except for this one exception.
Yeah. And I've sat with nurses that have sat with me, and the nurse we left and they were like, oh my gosh, did you feel all the people in the room with us? And I was like, no. It just was so full of people. And I was like, yeah, I just didn't feel that. So I don't know that I'm like an empath in that way, but I have had some really like sacred moments with people.
But you're saying others have, though, who are more and say intuitive. They feel the presence of loved ones in the room.
Yeah.
Wow.
I can't tell you how many times I've had someone who's getting, right before they become non-responsive say, my husband was here, or my dad was here, or my mom was here. My dad, when he was passing, he's a couple of days before said to me, Grandma was here. And I was like, I'm sure she was, Dad. And she had died before. So I never discount that ever. Like, who am I to say who was here or who wasn't?
I wonder how that works. I wonder if it's like they're just hanging out and then they have like pagers and it's like, oh, it's time to go over here. Got another one coming in. Yeah, what's your theory?
Well, my theory is, and it's very much from a social work perspective, but especially with someone that's on hospice and it's not a quick and sudden death, there's a term we call actively dying, which kind of sounds
Right.
oxymoronic to say
Like
actively
terminal
dying,
living. Yeah.
but they are in the process. Yeah. So at the very end of their life, not responsive to any kind of external stimuli, but their heart's still beating, their lungs are still breathing, and they're transitioning from this life to the next. I am a very spiritual person. I have strong faith tradition, and I believe that we go on after this life. And I believe that there are people we know and love and recognize that are waiting for us to be like, welcome. I am going to be your social worker through this transition to help you get used to your new environment. So that's my belief.
That's happened to our own family. I've mentioned this on the show, you probably heard, but that happened with a couple of older relatives and this would be a week or two while not in hospice care, but certainly in the hospital on their last stretch. And they would say that relatives had come by and visited them and just like, we're waiting for you. Everything's going to be fine. You'll be okay. And then we would say like, well, Grandma, they passed away 40 years ago. She goes, I know. So they're aware. And I find it a very comforting kind of experience. And like you said, it's more discomforting for the survivors of the family member who now have to deal with the empty space they've left. But if you would, please give us a brief explanation of who are the team members in hospice care and what are their roles?
We have a medical director. They play a role kind of from a distance. It's really a nurse-run organization. The nurses go out, they're the eyes and the ears, making sure that any of the symptoms like pain, bowel issues, any of those kind of things are managed. And they go out multiple times during the week, sometimes up to every day. Then there's a CNA, a certified nursing assistant that will go out and help with like personal cares. They go out a couple of times a week, up to every day if they need to. And then there's spiritual support with the chaplain, and then there's social work support. And then there's also volunteers. So hospice loves their volunteers. And I do inpatient hospice at a couple of the local hospitals here too. And we have a No One Dies Alone volunteer group that people come and sit. So no one dies alone. So that's pretty much the team. We're supplemental support. So we're not the primary caregivers. We go in to provide supplemental support. And I've had people on hospice for minutes, and then I've had people on hospice for several years. So anywhere in between.
It's kind of interesting that there's just so much range there in terms of the timetables. I guess it just depends on a person's constitution and genetics and their whatever they're afflicted with, or
and insurance.
Sure.
Oh, really?
There is the real world. Yep. It's it costs money.
Yeah.
My
30-second elevator speech is, given the past 6 months, if we projected that trajectory into the next 6 months, is it possible? And a physician would say, yes, it's possible, given this particular trajectory, that this person will die in 6 months. And so that's the certification, is that a physician says, yes, in the next 6 months, it's very possible that this disease is now terminal.
Yeah.
That's where we kind of go every 6 months.
In light of that, as you said, your goal is to keep the patient as comfortable as possible. You don't try to prevent anything or rush things along. You just let nature take its course.
And there is a misperception with hospice. I've been called Dr. Kevorkian. People have said, oh, you just go in to kill people. And I'm like, that's not really the case. What happens most times is someone is so uncomfortable and in so much pain that when hospice finally comes in and we're able to get a person comfortable with, no more agitation, no more pain, and and sometimes the bowel regiment comes in to provide comfort. A person gets comfortable enough that they actually can just let go and pass. And oftentimes people equate those two things of us providing medication and pharmaceutical support to provide comfort as you killed them, you overdosed them, you sped this up, when in fact that's not really the case.
Meanwhile, our former president, Jimmy Carter, went into hospice care and then a week or two later went out to lunch with Rosalind.
Good for him. And we advocate for that.
I know,
live your life.
Yeah.
Right. It's the comfort, and you let the person decide. And as you were saying, they often kind of know and are accepting of it. And have you noticed in the
Hmm.
course of your years that there's a pattern overall, or is there no pattern? Is everybody really different each time?
No, there's definitely a pattern. And I think as we get older and our bodies are wearing out, there's definitely more of a pattern. And so I have this little speech, like I always talk about hospice being just a lot of education. We do a ton of education because we as a society don't do a good job talking about death and dying,
Mhm.
especially if it's just kind of the natural progression. If it's not a celebrity that's died, it's not a tragic, huge tragedy where someone died, we don't really talk about it. And our movies and TV shows don't do a great job
No.
of portraying what really that looks like. And I get that, there's reasons behind that. But quickly, we generally see someone become bedbound and then they just are sleeping more hours of the day than not. They get to a point where they're not responsive to any talking to them. They won't respond. But like if you roll them over, they were in pain, you could tell. Some nonverbal cues would indicate that they were in pain. And then as things progress, they get to a point where even painful stimuli doesn't affect them. But again, they're breathing, their hearts are beating, and that we say, hours to day,
Yeah.
and then they pass. And that's generally, and I give that with the caveat of everyone is individual, everyone has their own process, but barring a sudden event like a massive stroke or a massive heart attack, that's kind of the trajectory that we see with people. Younger people, their hearts and lungs seem to hold out a little bit longer than some of the older folks. So it can be prolonged a little.
Well, that's why this case was so unusual for you, it seems. And in light of that, would you describe
Yeah.
your daily work routine, which leads into this story you're going to tell?
Sure. So every morning we have, a morning call where we all hop on the phone. Hospice is available 24/7. So they have a number. If it's 3 o'clock in the morning, they call. We have an on-call nurse that comes out. So, between 8:30 and 9 every morning, we all hop on this call, hear about what the day looks like moving forward. And then also the on-call nurse gives report over what happened overnight. And so that's pretty standard every day. And that's how we determine what our day is going to look like. We schedule and we think we're going to have a day. And just when we get to the point where we think, oh, yeah, I've got this day all scheduled, it doesn't happen.
Right.
Something like this happens, or, there's been an emergency or something. And so
Mm-hmm.
we have to be pretty flexible. That's what a typical day looks like starting at. So this particular day, the on-call nurse gave us a report, said they had a weird night. It was a weird night, kind of filled us in with a few of the details, but said maybe you guys want to start there. So the nurse and I, after just getting the few details, were like, let's make this visit together. Ideally, when we can see that they're very close to the end of life, I like to be there with the nurse when I can. And so we made the plan and we went together, parked our cars across the street, went in, and we went into the patient's room, and she was not responsive at all. She obviously was still alive. She was breathing, but she was just this little tiny, frail woman. And if I remember correctly, she was in her 70s and just a teeny tiny thing. And so the nurse and I walked in with the daughter, and I always like to just kind of get a vibe of how family's coping. It sounded like you had a rough night. So the nurse was checking her vitals and was like, oh yeah, given what's going on, it looks like she's really close. And I turned to the patient's daughter and I said, it sounds like you guys had a rough night. Do you want to tell me about what happened? And she's like, oh yeah, we did. So she and her two sisters and brother So 4 children of the patient were sitting in her room bedside, had been given information that, we were looking at hours till mom dies. So they're sitting bedside, kind of sitting vigil, which happens a lot. And so as they were sitting, it's really interesting. You start to get kind of hyper-focused on a patient's breathing because their breathing will change. It'll be super shallow. People can go a long time between breaths. And just when you think, oh my gosh, this is it, they've passed, they'll take another breath and you're like, oh, okay. So it's really common for that to happen. And so people get really fixated on it. So they were sitting, they were watching mom, and they were pretty sure she took her last breath. Okay, this is it. It's the middle of the night. The protocol is to call the hospice nurse. Well, this particular patient had an identical twin sister that lived about 20 minutes away. So they called her first and they said, Mom just passed. Get out here. She's like, I'm on my way. And then they called the hospice nurse who happened to live just probably 5 to 10 minutes away. She's like, hey, I'm on my way. Kind of expected it, as we got the evening report. Don't be surprised if you hear a call from this family. She gets a call. She goes out, was there probably 10 minutes, had listened with the stethoscope, was like, yep, she's passed. She starts to, do some post-mortem care, verifying mortuary with family, getting ready to call the mortuary to have them come pick her up. And the twin sister comes in probably 20 to 25 minutes after her last breath. And she sees her sister and she just starts to sob and she crawls up into the bed with her and is just laying over her and just sobbing. And she presses her forehead against her sister's forehead and just is crying. And her sister just takes this big shuddering breath in, just shocked everyone. What? And the nurse was even a little shook with this. And so it was like, okay. And then she actually kind of started into a normal breathing pattern, which the nurse is like, let's sit here for a minute. Let's see what's going to happen. This veteran nurse has had similar things happen before. But when she looks at the clock, and I trust the nurse, and I know like when we're in crisis and we're watching this kind of thing, like time can either speed up really fast or it can slow way down. And so we're not the best historians when it comes to time like that, but I trust the nurse. And she was like, it was a good 25 minutes that she hadn't breathed at all. It was like, okay, we'll just keep doing this, I guess. So the nurse spent another probably hour or so, and she just started that regular breathing pattern. So the nurse was like, of course, I'm going to leave. If anything happens, call me, I'll come back. But we'll just, I guess, continue on. If I don't hear back from you, I'll make sure that your regular case management nurse, so the nurse who's assigned to this patient, Jane, will come back in the morning and check on you. So she didn't hear anything else. Then she gave us the quick report in the morning, and the nurse and I headed out to Jane's house. So we go in, we ask what happened. She's telling us this whole story. And we just kind of did an assessment. And after you've done this for a while, you can tell when someone's close. And she felt like it was close this time. So we thought, we're just going to stay here. So we talked with the daughter. The nurse had, taken vitals. Her heart rate was through the roof. Her blood pressure was really low. Her breathing was all very shallow and kind of all over the place. All very, very common indicators that end of life was very close. So the daughter, Jane's daughter, starts rallying the troops again, calls her 2 sisters. Jane's son lived in the basement apartment, so he came up and we sat there with her for a little bit. And then there's this, it looks like a fish out of water is the best way to explain it, that kind of breathing. And when you see someone do that, you know that these are their last breaths, very gasping and gulping like that. And so she had done that. And I was like, oh, okay, this is very common, very normal. I have seen this countless times. I'm, standing with family, explaining this is very normal, very common. And we watched her take her last breath. And, the nurse very tactfully said, let's give it a few minutes. Let's wait and see what's going to happen. And so at this point, the 4 children were bedside, and the nurse and I excused ourselves, and we're like, we're going to just go and sit in the living room and let you guys have this time with your mom. We don't ever want to rush anyone. We don't ever want someone to be on our time frame. We're there to honor whatever it is that they need and however they need to start their grieving process. So we went out and sat in the living room, and we're just kind of discussing this particular situation. I was like, oh, that's so weird. Can you imagine 25 minutes? That I've never heard of anyone going 25 minutes. So the nurse and I kind of made a plan together that she was going to wait until 30 minutes, and then she would go and put the stethoscope on, and we're like, clearly after 30 minutes, nothing has happened. Like, it's official. So after about 30 minutes, we peeked our head in, and the nurse was like, I just want to do another set, just make sure. And at that point, she really had indeed passed. And I walked in behind the nurse, and I looked at the patient, Jane, on the bed, and she looked completely different. The daughters had asked if they could perform the postmortem care, because normally what happens is, and if I'm there, I'm more than happy to help provide the postmortem care. I feel like it's part of honoring this patient's life. It's one last act of service that I can do for this family, for this person, is to help with the postmortem care. But I also 100% want families to be involved in that any way they can, because it can really be a healing part of the grieving process. So the daughters said, we'd really like to take care of the postmortem care for mom and get her dressed in the outfit we want her to go to the mortuary in. So we were like, yes, take care of your mom. We'll go back into the living room. We'll wait. And then they're like, okay, you can come back in. So we go back in, and that's when I looked at her and I was like, something has changed. She just, I always want families and little kids. I think it's good for little kids to come in and see that grandma or whoever has passed. But I thought right then, I don't know if I would let a kid see this. I would see Jane like this, because it was scary. She had changed. She looked like she had been dead for months, like almost desiccated, a skeleton with like parchment over her. And then I missed this. I didn't see this, but she had really long hair. So I don't know if she had it tucked up behind her or what, but she had long hair, and the family had brushed her hair, and it was like to her waist. And it was a very unnatural dark auburn for a 70-something-year-old woman. But it was her bed, the nightgown she was in was white. And so it was this really stark hair against this really white background, and her face, she just looked like, all I could think was, if I saw this in a haunted house, it would be terrifying. And the lights were on, but the shadows on her face did not seem to match the way that the light should have been on her. It just felt like there was just a darkness around her. And it was very disconcerting. And as a trained professional, I'm like, keep your affect flat. Don't make this about you. See what the family needs.
You don't want to look shocked in your expression.
Yeah.
But she looks, as you described, very skeletal.
Mm-hmm.
Sunken eyes, drawn skin. And the thing that was described that caught my attention was it looking like there were deep, dark shadows on her face that were not coming from natural light, as the light in the room would have cast on her face naturally.
It was, I mean, I feel like I'm a pretty articulate person, but it was really hard to put into words
Right.
what exactly had changed. And I'd seen it in the past that there is a change that happens when someone dies. And my personal belief is that it's the spirit leaving the body, and now this shell of a body is left.
Right.
And I think once the life force, the spirit, whatever you want to call it, leaves the body, it changes. And it's just not the same. And I mean, I've seen that countless times where you're like, yeah, this person is no longer with us. This is now just a shell of who they were.
Right.
This was on another level. She had changed so much. Like I said in the email, it seemed like she had been dead for months.
When in fact, she'd just been dead for about an hour.
If that, yeah.
This was, you would say, any professional or family member looking at her would say, this was shocking to see her like that.
Yes.
Wow.
Yeah. So I felt like I did a good job of keeping my affect pretty flat. We called the mortuary. The twin sister came, said her goodbye. It was she really passed this time.
Mm-hmm.
And then I saw the twin sister, and nothing like, I mean, maybe the same height.
Yeah.
But I would never have said, oh, these are twins. I wouldn't even have said that they were sisters. They looked so different. So identical twins, definitely. And, being sick and being on hospice, it changes the way you look.
Right.
But there was really, if I hadn't known that they were related, I would have thought it was a family friend.
Yeah. Like there was nothing in her left that was resembling the sister or the family. She was like an empty husk of sorts.
As we were leaving, we offered our condolences, said that the mortuary asked, how long would you like until we have the mortuary come? And they gave us, so we called the mortuary, say, if you can come out as soon as possible, family's ready. And so we had finished our visit and we started walking across the street. And it was the weirdest thing because as we walked across the street, our cars were parked just on the street, parallel parked. And I looked over at the nurse and she looked at me, and it was almost like we said at the same time, like something like, that was the weirdest thing, or did you see what I saw, kind of thing. And it was like this exchange that we had that was like validation that we had in fact both witnessed that drastic change in Jane, and that it was validating, which was great to hear from the nurse that she had that same experience. But like any other job, we got in our cars and we drove away. And I mean, we were there probably a good 4 hours. And so it was like, oof, I've got a few more visits I need to make. So, there were more people that we had to go see. And so we just kind of got on with our day.
But in that moment, that experience had set a high bar in terms of unusual things that you had personally witnessed, even if nothing else happened from this point forward.
Yeah, if that had been it, I would have been like, and like I said in my email, like I've done this for so long, and some people I meet once, some people I meet several times, and memories start to get fuzzy. Situations, like I'll talk with someone and they'll say, oh, do you remember so-and-so? And I'm like, no, you have to give me, where did they live? Give me something unique that will help me remember, because it can't be, the old lady, with the walker that,
right. It's always that. Yeah.
Right.
That narrows it down. But like I said, there are a few times in my career that I have some very flashbulb memories. And this is one that I will take to my grave, because it was so impactful.
So 4 months go by. What happens next?
So it was about 4 or 5 months, and I just got on with my life, still seeing patients. And I get a call from Jane's daughter, and she asked if we could meet, which isn't uncommon. Grief and bereavement, that's part of my job. I do a lot of grief therapy. So I was kind of had the expectation that that's what it was. And I said, sure, would you like me, I go out into the community. So I was like, I could come to your house. Where would you like to meet? She's like, actually, can I just come to your office? I was like, sure, that's not common at all. But I was like, yeah, sure, come to my office. So she came in and she sat down and I was like, what can I help you with? And she said, I thought I was going crazy, but I just can't get this out of my mind. And I've talked with my siblings and now I need to come and talk with you. And I said, okay. And she said, did you notice anything different about my mom after she died? And being a very good social worker, I did not answer the question straightforward. I answered the question with a question. I said, did you notice something different? Tell me what you experienced. Because there were a couple of reasons. First of all, if she didn't have the same experience I did, I don't want her to now carry this for the rest of her life. That the social worker and the nurse thought my mom looked like she was a haunted house prop. That was the last thing I would ever want someone to think. And then also, I wanted to get her perspective. So she had said almost exactly the same thing that we had experienced, down to like the darkness that seemed to just shroud Jane. And when she started talking, then I said, yes, in fact, that is the same experience that we had. And she did say to me at that point, she said, I'm so glad I didn't let my grandkids come and see my mom. I remember thinking, that's very interesting because I had that thought. I don't think I'd be comfortable letting kids see this. So we talked back and forth about it. And she said, I just wanted to get your opinion and what your perspective was. And she said that she had talked with her siblings. And when her older brother was 17, the family moved into that house. And like people do, it was an older home. They did some research on the house, came across a newspaper article, I think. She said that the information they got was that it was an orchard and that there had been orchard workers, and that they were in the orchard after work and were playing cards, and there was a fight had broken out over the card game, and one of the orchard workers had murdered the other orchard worker. And so there was a murder there, and then their house was built right on that site. So when they found that out, Jane and her then husband decided, let's try to communicate with the spirit that died here. Let's use a Ouija board. And so the 17-year-old son was like, heck yeah, I'm in. Let's do this. This sounds cool. And so they did use the Ouija board, and the son reported that someone showed up, and it was an evil, ominous presence. And they quickly put the Ouija board away. I understand that you can't just throw them away. I don't know what they did with the Ouija board, but he reported that there was just a change in the house. Like everyone was bickering more, and it just never seemed like there was any sense of peace in the house, and that Jane's attitude had changed, like her personality had even changed. And it got to the point that someone said, we need to have someone come in, clergy come in and bless this house. And they did. They had a member of a clergy come in, bless the house. And after, they said that's what they needed. Like the mood lifted, everything was good, that life moved on. But just a few months before Jane passed, she was having a conversation with her son and said she was compelled to try to contact that spirit of the person who died again. And he's like, bad idea, Mom. Don't. It was not a good thing. We don't want to invite that back in. And she says, well, I've tried, and I don't think she didn't use a Ouija board again. So I don't know how she tried to contact that spirit again, but she did. And she said she felt that presence come back. And she tried to say, no, just kidding. I don't want you back. And then as the daughter said to me, she said, I felt like once my mom died, whatever it was trying to enter my mom's now shell of a body. And that is what caused her to change. And I was like, okay, trying to keep that, flat affect that I've trained. And I then spoke to her about getting in touch with her clergy and meeting with him and processing through that with him, because that was a skill set that was not mine.
Understandably so. I've not heard of anything like that happening. I mean, to anybody, we have medical care workers in our family and several relatives who have, of course, passed. And the one thing I'll say that's the really only uncanny kind of thing that's happened is that the nurses generally know, I would say, within 15 minutes, a half an hour when someone's going to pass. Like, they nailed it.
Yeah.
And they would say, you better get down here. She's got about 3.5 hours left. And they were right. And that makes an impression on you. But this being so different. And to go back and to clarify, though, Jane's daughter was told by her older brother, who was 17 at the time, is when they first thought it would be a fun, cool idea to try and contact the spirit of the murdered man. But it sounds like who knows what they got a hold of, or something bad and evil that had caused that one man to kill the other. Something intervened. And when she tried it again, and for whatever odd reason, and again, you could say people aren't thinking they're most clear when they're at that stage of life, and her son says, Mom, not a good idea. She, well, I just feel really compelled. I really should do this. But then she tried in some unknown way and got, quote, messed up with something bad. And at that point, it was too late. The scary thing to me is that if this thing was able to make that transition and Jane revived a little, would it still be in there? I mean, not probably the best vessel to enter, but it's just something about that invasion, that violation of sacred humanity by something that is just having a lark, having a boost of energy or something, or just in a parasitic fashion.
Yeah, almost in a desperate way, right? Like, oh, here's a chance for something, to experience something.
Yeah.
And I am a spiritual person. I am a woman of faith. And I believe that if we've got good, we have to have bad, right? Opposition in all things.
Sure.
And so I believe that through my work, I've experienced incredibly positive things. I've experienced the veil very, very thin. And I've experienced what I would call, angelic visitations. But if I believe in that, then I have to believe in the other.
Sure.
Do you think when Jane came back after being gone for nearly half an hour that maybe it was this thing that brought her back when her sister was there?
Oh, that's a good question. I don't think so, because if I think back on it, her countenance had not really changed until after.
So it wasn't until after
she had passed. That is when I noticed. And I had sat with her for about an hour before she passed.
Did you know Jane when she was still sentient, and did you get to know her at all? No. So when you came into the process, she was already non-communicative.
She was somewhat responsive, mostly to kind of nonverbal, to if she heard a voice, her facial expressions would change. She had some, nonverbal signs of pain and discomfort, which are very common.
Yeah.
An attempt to talk to family that she recognized, but nothing, no kind of meaningful conversation or interaction that I personally had with Jane.
As we said at the top, it's also a cautionary tale. Kids, do not play with Ouija boards. It's like picking up hitchhikers, and you might get someone fun and you have a great road trip, or it could be the worst
I can't think of people that are having fun with the things they're contacting through Ouija boards, but maybe that's because those people don't call us or email us. But I went and did a Ouija board. It was amazing. And then we went to Mexico with it, and the ghost came with us. There's a time when I would have asked more questions that maybe supported a little bit of, what's skepticism here? And so maybe I would try to do that now, but I don't want to, especially when it comes to an end of life situation, I don't want to affect anyone's perception of it, yours or the family's, or even if they have no idea this is being recorded and shared or whatever. I don't want to ask those questions. I mean, I can't think of any mundane reason what somebody with your experience would have mistaken this series of events for, like the thing that there's just nothing I can think of. And we learned a few things over the years, as you might imagine, and you've heard. I mean, one of the things I learned when we covered the Somerton Man was about how after death, the hair and fingernails appear longer because the skin and the soft tissue's receding, not because they're growing. I've learned a lot of things over the years with us. You know all that stuff. You know this stuff. You've been there, as you said, at least 100 times, if not more, when people have passed. And so your testimony carries more weight. And I'm not inclined to question it as I would say if you asked me about, something about airplanes, because I'm not a pilot, or something about, we don't know what it's like. You know what it's like. You've been there. And that's one of the things we look for with these stories that we like to get, especially at Halloween, is we're getting them from folks who are experts in interacting with the stories the way that you have. And we appreciate your coming on to share it and give us your perspective. And I think the fact that it's made such a mark on you psychologically is really significant.
I've had so many experiences, and I've had so many people, like I said, tell me that someone was here or that they felt someone. And my ego isn't so big that I would say, well, I don't see them, so they're clearly not here. Like, who am I to take that experience from them? I just feel like, as I've done this countless times, and I see patterns, that just because I don't see someone does not mean they're not there. That I will go with what I experience, and I will take that, and I will be grateful for it, and I will move on. But I would never presume to tell someone else what they did or didn't experience.
Well, Rachel, thank you so much for reaching out to us, taking the time to share your story with us and with our listeners. And thank you for listening to our show for over 9 years. I'm kind of surprised.
I'm surprised that hasn't.
I was shocked when it was 9 years.
Hasn't led to any trauma. That just the hours alone.
That's okay. I'm a therapist. I can work through it.
It's great to hear.
Thanks. Have a good evening.
Well, those stories really struck a chord with us. I mean, we go back to Megan and the note that mysteriously appeared while she was in the shower. We got Chad, who's had a lifetime of events, a lot of them just creepy on their own. Not to mention, as we alluded to before, the frantic feral eating of the guy who disappeared at the bar. Where did that guy go? And I love that everybody, everybody that was in the bar with him was like, well, that's a little strange. We're going up the street. By the way, when he was telling us that story, in this tiny little town that he was in, up the street was to a bar called the Regal Beagle.
Right.
And during the time that he was telling us that story, the Regal Beagle is named for the bar that was the bar that they all went to on Three's Company, a very old TV show that some people might not remember. But that's the bar they went to. And probably about that time when he was telling us about that, Suzanne Summers, who was the star of Three's Company, may have been passing away just this very same week. In terms of the weird sort of synchromysticism, somehow we're talking about the Regal Beagle, and then I think maybe even that day we interviewed him was when she passed. So little strangeness there. Yeah. Rest in peace, Suzanne Summers. The Regal Beagle. But anyway, the thing about that story, the guy coming in, and we've had those stories before with people who don't know how to eat. They disappeared. The famous story about the guy that went to the steakhouse in New York and didn't know how the knife and fork worked, all that stuff.
That's a little more charming. At least he didn't put the whole slab in his mouth and start gnawing at it. Like I said, there's levels of disturbability. There's levels of disturbing things to see. Well, just the encounter, because he looked weird. This other guy looked pretty normal, and everything that we've seen tonight, except for the last one here, everybody looks pretty normal. And I think, that was my point in commenting with the stories in these folks, I think it's even more subversive to our sense of safety and rationality and logic, the more that these things look like they're not supposed to be wrong.
Right.
And then they're wrong. And then there's no denying that. And it's like, how do I put those two together? But it's like the people showing up like with the stake, or the guy with the wire, the MIB with the wire hanging down, like, let me just get that for you. Like the little social faux pas. This is kind of the same thing. Or, I mean, like I said, you could break this down. It's like, okay, he was trying to get attention. That's a funny gag, maybe, where he thought it was. He's just goofing around and he does that. But then how does he get out of the building? Okay, so it's this elaborate magic trick, this escape artist thing. For what purpose? 3 people to have this story that's going to be told years later. Not that anything has to make sense. You know what I'm saying? People say, well, that doesn't make sense, or this makes the most amount of sense. I don't care about sense. If you're telling me this happened to you and you're sincere about it, and I think the story is probably true, I'm not looking for sense. I just want to know the details as they happen.
Yeah.
And I'm just going to put that on the back burner. We're going to put that on the shelf and remember that later the next time somebody eats a bag of chips like a rabid raccoon. Okay, now we get to our third story. And the reason I like that, one, is that Tess, it was one of the creepiest pics she saw. But also because of what we talked about before. We choose stories. So, of course, there's not 3 haunted house stories in a row. We try to mix them up so the variety and genres are a little different. We do that with our regular lineup in the shows we cover, although that would be heavily debated and argued by some people who think we only cover. It's like, I'm sick of this subject. Please stop doing shows on this. And they think most of the shows are like that. But really, we do try to have a healthy mix in the playlist, let's say. And this one really spoke to me because it does have those touching stories about family members that pass away that we're all going to experience. We all go through it. It bookends this year because we started off with a end of life doula story.
That's right.
And we're going to get near the end of this year with another type of story, which is not as heartwarming. But I like the evolution of the story that goes from, again, pretty normal. We all go through it, and takes a really dark, visually dark and sinister turn, which nobody was expecting. So I love that we were able to get that in the lineup for this year. But also there was a couple things that I was wondering about afterwards. I mean, since I read it, that I don't think we got to discuss with Rachel. One is that I wondered when her identical twin went in there and was in such sorrow. I think it's an especially and different and unique set of emotions when an identical twin passes away, because that's also kind of you.
Yeah.
It's a mirror copy of you. You've shared so much, that special bond that identical twins have and all twins have, maybe above and a little different from that of other siblings. But in this case, it's her identical twin passing away, and she's still vibrant, the alive twin, and she puts her forehead to her sick and dying twin. And I wondered if that revived her after 25 or 30 minutes that she was not breathing.
Yeah.
And I wondered what she was feeling in that moment. Or did she genuinely pass away and the twin happened to be there and something else brought her back to life for another day?
Yeah.
So those things I was wondering about. And I texted our good friend Jill in the morning today before we started to record this stuff. And I had sent her the story. She's a paranormal investigator and has done years of research out in the field and reading and this and that, and encountered a lot of stories herself. But I just want to know her opinion. And she also wondered those things. She wondered what the twin felt being that close and in that moment. And I think more so, did she feel a change? And Jill wanted to know what the patient Jane, what her demeanor was like after the occupation, you could say. So those are things to wonder about. And again, Rachel's probably not going to have an answer to that, of course, other than her own feelings. And as she said, like, I can't say or speak to the damage to her soul or the condition of it, but I know what I saw. I know how I felt about it. So in that conversation, this is something that Jill replied with. She said it sounded like a step in. She was gone the first time and something stepped into her body for a while, maybe sucked up the last of her vitality. I don't think it affected her soul, but definitely used her body once she was out of it, or so close to passing she couldn't keep it out. Crazy story. I'm sorry the family had to see that. And that was Jill's response. And I echo those sentiments. It's not something anybody should have to see, but what an odd and strange series of predicaments that lead up to it. And again, a little bit like the Ghost Note story, in that this is not just an older woman who had some kind of strange medical condition, because that can happen after you die, or sometimes they exhume people and they appear not to have desiccated at all. And that's also a strange thing. But here, in both stories, you have a connecting element to an existential outside thing. One was the criminal case of the professor. Here is that the family thought they had connected with something through a Ouija board that was evil.
So I do wonder what compelled Jane to contact this thing again. Was it her conscience? Did she feel guilty? Or was it this thing wanting one last taste?
Personal legends like these are like striking a match in a dark room. Suddenly you have an insight into the void that you didn't have before. But sometimes, no sooner is that match lit when something unseen snuffs it out. That's going to wrap up our listener stories for this Halloween. A very special thanks to our contributors for this episode and last week's. Also, a very special thanks to everyone who sent a story in. We plan to create a new series of shorts centered around those, so don't be surprised if you hear from us in the future. We'll be back next week with our third and final show of October, a deep dive into a spooky part of the country we've never covered before. And keep an eye on our feed for the first 2 episodes of the newest show from the Astonishing Legends Network, Scared All the Time.
Astonishing Legends is edited by Sarah Voorhees-Wendell at VW Sound and co-produced by Tess Feifel, who is also head of research and the social media manager. Our technical producer is Ed Vicola, or as we call him, the Mechanic. Special thanks to our announcer, John Boland.
Hi, I'm Kat Wells.
Kate Trammell, and I give permission to Astonishing Legends
Galaxy-wide in perpetuity. I'm Dustin Stevens.
Here goes.
Again, my name is Dustin Stevens.
Wells, like Wells Fargo.
Kate.
Our theme, which is available as a ringtone, was composed by Judson Crane at foundermusic.com. All other music and sound design for the show is composed and created by Alan Carestia.
Our logo was created by Tommy Beaver Design, and our animated graphics for social media and YouTube are done by Joshua Sloan at deadstreetproductions.com.
Every episode going back to September of 2020 has a transcription available on its corresponding webpage at our website. Earlier transcriptions can be made available upon request to astonishingcontact@gmail.com.
Astonishing Legends would not be possible without you, our listeners. Visit our store at astonishinglegends.com or interact with us and other listeners on Instagram, Twitter, Discord, Facebook, and YouTube.
You can also visit us at patreon.com/astonishinglegends, where patrons have access to additional bonus content, including the Patreon exclusive show, Astonishing Junk Drawer, which is available every week. The main show is not. No part of this show may be reproduced anywhere without permission. Copyright Astonishing Legends Productions.
Good night.